This episode of How To Wrestling was requested by Alex Thompson, one of our lovely backers over at patreon.com/How To Wrestling. Hey, this show is 100% fan and listener supported, and we've got no ads in it, and it's because of all of our lovely backers who support us over on our Patreon page. Thank you so much to everyone who supported us so far through 2020 and into 2021. If you back, you don't just help support the show and help it get made, you also get access to a whole shed load of bonus content, including over 80 pay-per-view reviews from WWE, AEW, NXT from me and Joe going all the way back to 2015, or How To Revisited series, the Q&A video series that comes out monthly with Joe Graham, each episode over an hour, and our most recent series, and no doubt our most popular series currently, Pay-Per-View Classic, where Joe sets a brief and we go back and look at classic pay-per-views and review them. We've had an absolute whale of a time doing these the last few months. We've had Billy Keeble on for Survivor Series 2008. We had ECW December to Dismember 2006. Joe discovering her love of Vince McMahon through Survivor Series 1998, Vengeance 2002, and our most recent and biggest episode yet, something I was absolutely giddy to do and is one of our most fun episodes we've ever recorded, WrestleMania 17. I need say no more. Sit back and enjoy this episode. It's time for How To Mark Henry. Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of How To Wrestling, the world's first podcast detailing how to wrestling, how to get into wrestling, how to understand wrestling, and goodness knows maybe how to enjoy wrestling. And somebody's gonna get their ass kicked and or wig split, because today we're talking about the world's strongest man, continuing our World's Most series after doing the World's Most Dangerous Man, the world's most brilliant wrestler. Now we're at the world's strongest man, Mark Henry. I'm the world's explainingest man, Kevin Mann. Joined I am by the world's best co-host.
Aww.
Hey now, it's Joe Graham.
I think you're flirting with me.
Little bit. What can I say? We're watching Sexual Chocolate. It is January, the most romantic of months. You know, it's gotten the dander up, Joe. What can I say?
I'm very excited to do this episode.
Yeah.
It's long time coming.
It is, long time coming. He's someone who's appeared a few times in previous episodes, I think, in the background or associated with other people.
I feel Mark Henry is one of those people that's just... He's a kind of constant. Even though he's not been wrestling since I've started watching in, I think, 2014 or 15 when I started watching. But he's one of those people that's just, he's always around. Like, I think he's that perfect middle generation where he's kind of part of the Attitude Era bunch, but also part of the modern era as well.
Right.
I think of him and Big Show being like these tenured men who like have these long stretching careers that I never know where it starts and ends.
That is really interesting because I think Mark Henry is someone, like, when you would have started watching, he was in that kind of elder statesman role. Like, I was looking at his match list and just kind of when we were trying to find matches for this, and like his last 5 or 6 matches, it's like, you know, Royal Rumble, Battle Royale, Andre the Giant, or Greatest Royal Rumble. Like, he just is someone who's kind of shown up a lot to kind of remind you of who he is. But he has shown up in other episodes I've alluded to, some recent ones and some ones from way back. And given that, I don't know, interesting question to ask always, more so I think for Mark. What were your thoughts and memories of Mark, you know, before we got into our research of the episode? What did you really know about Mark Henry?
I knew Mark Henry was the world's strongest man. And I knew that was both a character, and I knew that to some extent that is true as well. I don't know how legally you prove that, because there's different ways of measuring strength.
So you took it as a given that he was the world's like strongest man, or at least had a claim of sorts to that.
I know he had a career as a strong man or power lifter or a very strong man who lifts heavy things. You know, that was his job for a long time, and he was considered the best in the world at it. I think he was in the Olympics or something. And I remember him, popping up in a few episodes, as you say. I think he first showed up in D-Lo's episode.
Yes, or I think China actually would have been the very first time he popped up.
Really?
Yeah, because I was obsessed with showing you some of China's like dates with
Oh,
Mark Henry and stuff
they went
like
on
that.
Dates. And I mean, most recently that I remember, the episode we did on Mae Young, because of course Mark Henry infamously had a passionate relationship with Mae Young,
which you are a big fan of outside of just the kind of, whoa, it's an old lady with this young, strong man.
Yeah.
There was a genuine sweetness there. I think we went in deep on that on the Mae Young episode.
Yeah.
How did those different things about Mark get reconciled in your head? Because you're like, I knew he was, world's strongest man. He was, a legend of sorts. And then you're like, that he did these really crazy, weird things, often with the female characters on the show.
Yeah.
Why did you think that kind of was? Did you think he was a serious guy, or what was it?
So basically, I always assumed it was because, so there's this industry, right, called professional wrestling, where,
yes.
Sometimes you have really silly characters, but they might be genuinely high accomplishing achievers. Like, for instance, there's this character who is a demon called Kane, and you may not know this, but the guy who is Kane
It's so much worse.
he's the actual mayor of Knoxville. Now, how do you get around that mentally in your head? Or Kurt Angle, genuine Olympic gold medalist. His whole shtick was that he sucked and was bad. I like that. That's wrestling. That was never an issue to me. As long as I've been aware of wrestling, World's Strongest Man and Sexual Chocolate, they're not opposites. That's just part of the characterization.
That is so interesting. It actually shows you like how good, for all their many faults at portraying people and whatnot, the WWE, there's these kind of handful of people sometimes where it feels like they have had kind of like, I don't want to say an embarrassing career, but certainly like if you were going to come up to somebody who's like the prospective Olympian and go, hey, going to be siring a hand in a couple of years. we're gonna do a lot of kind of borderline tasteless stuff and a lot of actually tasteless stuff. It's going to be 15 years before you get a proper shake at the stick. I'll be the first to admit, before my mentions get flooded, I had no love for Mark Henry. And I'm not saying no love, I had no respect for Mark Henry really growing up as a kid. And I think there's reasons for that, and I think we'll get into some of it, because he's someone whose wrestling career certainly did not start off or continue or begin the second or even the start of the third act with people on large thinking that he was a legend and all that. This is one of the first times we've done an episode about a wrestler where I think constantly growing up, as both a teenager, a little kid, and as a young adult, the narrative was, what a fucking disappointment, or what a fuck up, or you didn't reach potential, or whatever it was. And you start a podcast while the guy's in the middle of a career renaissance and you kind of don't get on board with it straight away. And let's just say there's egg all over my face with regards to the career of Mark Henry.
I see. So if I go back to an early episode of the Ashura podcast, it's going to be Kevin burying Sexual Chocolate.
100%.
That's really funny.
100%.
That's very funny.
And yeah, I think we'll get into why that is, as we get through it and all that. I want to talk about at the start, because it was the thing that was, quite headline for Mark Henry. The world's strongest man. How do you think you get that moniker? Or can anyone just kind of... Do you think it's like a self-declared thing or something like that?
Oh, no, I don't think it's a... I mean, in wrestling, I think to a point you probably could make it a self-declared thing. Mm-hmm. But it's the fact that he had a career outside of wrestling as like a legitimate, strong athlete. There's probably a term... I don't want to use the wrong term. It might be powerlifting or something else. I don't know. But either way, his job was to be very, very, very strong. And I'm pretty sure when it comes to things like that, you can't just go around saying, oh, I'm the strongest.
Yeah.
It's like, I think as a swimmer, you can't say, or like as a runner, you can't say, oh, I'm the fastest, unless you are genuinely, you've won the most medals or no one can beat you.
Yes.
So as far as I'm aware, like, that was the case. Like, he was, he didn't have proper competition. He was never defeated, something like that. He was legitimately very, very, very strong.
I will say, having going to sound like Nathan for you here now. I've been on the bodybuilding forums, guys, right?
Oh.
Just purely for research. Stop this.
Sure, Vince.
Look, I looked at the bit. I had to find out what Gary Stridham was up to these days. Did he lose my number? Has he not got my Twitter handle? What's going on? But I was checking out. I've done a lot of research because, as a kid, I did not buy it at all. 100% thought, no, it's just a gimmick they've given him. He had some legitimate claims potentially at one point, but no way in hell. Like, I remember using my kind of touchstone for it. I know because I made fun of him of it on the first season of the Attitude Era podcast, was that he came like last in the Olympics in powerlifting. So and Kurt Angle, we just reached a point in SmackDown Crawl where Kurt Angle's like, Mark Henry, you shamed this country, you came last in the Olympics. I was like, as a child, and realizing it was kind of what I took as Mark Henry's career for most of my life.
Aww.
But having done some research on the bodybuilding forums, and we'll put in the recommended bonus viewing on the website, there is like a nice little 5-minute explainer from a bodybuilding expert who kind of laid out the case for it. He does have a legitimate claim. He had kind of a claim before 2002 where he had a lot of like world records to his name, and he'd done a lot of things in powerlifting, and powerlifting just lifting heavy weights off the ground.
Okay, so that's the thing, isn't it? Because bodybuilding, at least as far as I know, is more like what Arnold Schwarzenegger did.
Different world.
It's kind of like body sculpting. It's about being strong, but also about looking a certain way, having muscles in certain places,
and the posing.
And the posing. There's a modeling side to it.
Symmetry, all that jazz. Yeah.
Whereas powerlifting is just what you can lift.
Yes, it's lifting heavy weights, and like to get in, like you can see more in the video that we'll post, but there is kind of distinctions between powerlifting, strongman contests, and the general nature of these differences is what you're expected to do, as in like you're meant to do like a certain lift with certain types of weights. And the fact that Mark had almost exclusively competed in powerlifting made some in the strongman community go, well, you ain't such a strong man after all.
So what's the difference between powerlifting and strongman?
Strongman is a series of contests, among them which include powerlifting-like elements, but will also include things like tractor trailer pulls, or like, lifting up these specific devices that are like strongman contest specific.
So in that sense, strongman is, as it sounds, it's more to do with general all-round body strength of different body parts, whereas powerlifting is mainly, disclaimer.
Slightly more narrow, maybe?
Yeah, it's about lifting things above you.
Yes. And one of them is called a clean and jerk. I don't even know what that means, but it sounds really funny, doesn't it? Let's all have a proper laugh at that.
Sounds kind of rude.
I'm really worried all these powerlifters are going to come and pick me up now in some sort of a rage. Before 2002, he had, you could argue, a kind of contentious claim to being the strongest man in the world, or a world's strongest man. And then he was like, right, I'm going to go address this. And he did have a very, and I would say by the end of the research we've done here today, an overwhelming claim to being the world's strongest man. But like the top comment on that video is, I always thought it was just a gimmick. And like, 100% I thought that as a kid. A lot.
Okay, so why did you think that?
Because that's like what you do in wrestling, isn't it? Oh, the world's strongest man. Oh, a bit of hyperbole for Vince McMahon. Who'd have thought, like...
Did you think Kurt Angle being an Olympic gold medalist was hyperbole?
I did for a while, yeah.
Oh, okay.
First year, I thought it was because of the name. I remember being on the playground and being like, you really think it's going to be called Kurt Angle? Like, seriously? What a made-up name. Like, come on.
I mean, you have a point. This is an industry with Bret the Hitman Hart. Like, he's not an actual assassin.
It is an industry where you can fall into one of two camps when you were a kid, I think, when you're a little kid particularly, which is you're on for the ride, you believe kayfabe, you don't want to be challenged on it. You're just like, yay, it's a show. Or then you're like a little snark like I was as a kid, where it's like, I've come into this knowing that it's fake from the get-go, so everything is fake. And I think it happens often in wrestling where that borderlines on cynicism to the point where you make yourself look like an idiot. And here we are. So we had a look at the Mark Henry documentary that was produced by WWE for his induction into the Hall of Fame, not to be confused with the Hall of Pain. We'll get to that in a bit. How do you think they did in terms of putting together a little piece about his career?
it was good. Yeah. I mean, this documentary is called World's Strongest Man, the Mark Henry story, and it came out in 2019. So that's when he went to the Hall of Fame then.
Yes, that was the year he went in. Yeah.
That feels like 2019 was this year, right? And yet that
No.
feels like it was like 5 years ago.
It's like 2 years ago, I think, now, officially.
That doesn't par in my brain.
Yeah, it's really strange. I like how they addressed from the get-go in the documentary about the role that, like, kind of names and monikers play in wrestling, because he's like, hi, I'm Mark Henry. I was the strongest man in the world, and I also portrayed the world's strongest man. And like, straight away, I'm like, I'm an idiot.
Yeah, he gets it. I think he I mean, you have to, don't you? I think if you, especially, taking a title like that, I mean, that must be hard as well, being like, yeah, I am the I don't know, because he was the world's strongest man. I don't know.
Well, it shows you how up against it he was, where he went off and is it, and then, like, a lot of wrestling fans, including those of us who thought we were knowledgeable at points in our teens, or like, no, surely not. Wrestling's always great to line up and have a pop at someone. It's something that comes across in this documentary somewhat, but, like, did it surprise you to find out about the hazing and the bullying that Mark has experienced in his career?
Little bit. I'm very high pitched there. As soon as it cut to JBL, who is what? There's not many interviews in this documentary. That was the kind of the saddest thing about this, is I feel Mark Henry has a lot of friends, for at least, from the clips I've seen of him, just generally, and like him on social media and stuff, like he's popular and beloved.
Definitely.
And yet there was only like 3 or 4 people interviewed on this, which is a shame. And JBL was one of them. And I guess they must be good friends now, because it was very clear that JBL was the one doing most of the hazing.
Yeah.
And he was talking about it in vague terms, as in JBL was, kind of excusing himself and being like, well, it was just what we did. And also, he's kind of asking for it. But it did surprise me in terms of the fact that one of the only things I did know about Mark Henry's past was something you mentioned 3 or 4 months ago, which was that because of his success as a powerlifter, he had always been like the star,
man,
like big fish in a little pond. Like, he comes from, was it Silsby, that's
little
it.
town,
where, like, they say in the documentary, because he came from a poor family who couldn't afford a lot of things, and so when he came to compete in the Olympics, the whole town came together to raise the funds so he could compete, because it's expensive.
It is incredible to hear, like, how you kind of arrive to the point where wrestlers want to haze him and all that,
Yeah, and it's clearly that, like, he was beloved from a very early age. He obviously was, like, popular. And then he gets to this, the WWE, and suddenly it's like, it's typical WWE haze. Well, it's typical wrestling hazing, which is like, well, you may be a big name in your pond, but around here you're nothing.
And you have to express that via the medium of bullying. But, like, Mark was, from a very, very young age, kind of had the moniker of being like, here's an exceptional young man in waiting. I found out when he was 10 years old, he was like 5'8" and 225 pounds. And, like, we were
I'm just trying to think how I don't work in pounds. I think that's heavier than me.
Yes, and a little shorter, or roughly the same height at age 10. Now, he's a tall enough man, but, like, the fact that he was built big from the get-go, big family, big brother, big dad. He had his first set of weights, like, by the time he was 13 or 14. There's a really sweet little story I found out, and it seems kind of bullshit, but I'll tell it anyway, because sweet stories are always nice to talk about, bullshit otherwise. But when he was a youngster going to see the wrestling show when he was like 7 or 8 years old, his favourite was Andre the Giant, and he went to reach to touch Andre, and he slipped and he fell over the barricade, and Andre the Giant allegedly just plucked him with one hand from the ground and put him back in his seat.
Aww, that's
one
nice.
Member of the WWE universe reaching out to another member of the WWE. I mean, seems so made up, but it's so sweet at the same time as well.
Yeah, I like that idea. I hope that's true.
We cut quite early in the documentary to 1995, before he's even signed with WWE, and he's already breaking world records.
Yeah.
800 pounds.
Yeah, he even in school, he was kind of like, they said that they set up the powerlifting team at his school because of Mark Henry's abilities. Like, it didn't exist. Mark Henry came along, was buff as hell, super strong, and they were like, we should probably compete because of him.
I mean, look, I don't pretend remotely to understand the ins and outs of 90% of athletic competition. 95, 99% I go as far as to say. Least of all powerlifting, because there's obviously so much in terms of the technique and what you need to do with your body to do it. But I will say, I was constantly very impressed and scared by him lifting the heavy thing.
Me too.
Whoa!
And it doesn't mean anything to me because I've never lifted a weight. And I'm not ever impressed by watching people like, because you can't tell how heavy something is just by it being lifted, and especially if it's someone really strong, because they make it look easy. And even still though, like, Mark Henry is so strong, he's at the point where even his equipment starts to look like it's struggling.
Yeah, it's like a cartoon. Like, he's picking up this giant cartoon weight, and it's the rebar in the middle is literally tilting towards the outer edge.
There's a clip right at the beginning of this documentary where he's lifting a heavy thing, and the bar and the weights looks like it's about to snap. But like, he looks like, I mean, he's putting a lot of work into it, but he doesn't look like he's struggling especially.
No, we actually see a few times where he drops the weights. They show later. They sprinkle it in, I think, just to show you, hey, this is like one of the most dangerous fucking goddamn things you could do. I might think, oh, he's just going to lift a thing, that's it. There's no physical contact. It's not a team sport. What could go wrong? And, you drop an 800-pound weight, the fucking ground cracks. Like, oh my good God in heaven. So yeah, he's beaten all these records which previously, people hadn't even approached trying to come near. Like, he had quite quickly a team around him of people in the city, as you say, of Silsby, of being like, right, he's gonna break world records pretty much non-stop. We just have to like point him in the right direction and he will be a mega star in powerlifting. And Mark is so fucking eloquent. Like, I know he hosts a radio show, I know he could talk, but man, he is so fucking eloquent and well-spoken in this. I love how he's able to talk like passionately about, I think I'm the strongest human that's ever lived, and not come across like a comic book villain.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think it's a very difficult thing to do, and I think anyone else in the industry who had even remotely like that sort of claim to a feat of strength would be such a dick about it. And instead, he's so,
we've seen Pumping Iron, folks. Like, we know what they're like.
But like, he's the strongest man in the world, and he is so modest,
humble, like,
so humble.
And he admits himself he wasn't always like that throughout his career. And there's like, lots of justification for Hayes, where it's like, oh, he's got a big head, so I'm going to be a fucking prick to him or whatever. And that's kind of how wrestling works, I guess, to an extent. So Silsby's an interesting place. I mainly know it just from his fake retirement speech. But here he is in this town, age 21, multiple world records to his name. He's trying out for the Olympics team. 1992, they reckon they'll get him onto the Olympic squad. And he's quite good at explaining the ins and outs of how Olympic athletes work. It's quite similar in some respects to... this is going to be very alienating for all the English and like everyone except a few people in Ireland, I guess. But in Ireland we have Gaelic games. It's like GAA. It's our national sport. We've got hurling, we've got football, Irish rules, and we are very strange, at least when I left, that these people are athletes at the top of their game, but you don't get paid because it's still technically like you're doing it for your community and all that. And that Mark's kind of explained like it's a similar deal. He's like, look, if you're an Olympic athlete, you're not like making loads of money unless you're getting loads of endorsements, which if you're... He wouldn't have been. And like the fact that a city comes together... Whoa!
But he says, he was struggling to afford to eat. His parents were really low income. And you can only imagine, anyone who's been a teenage boy or has lived with a teenage boy knows how much the average teenage boy needs to eat.
Lots.
And not even just boys, like anyone of any gender occasionally goes through a period of like, oh, I need to devour this to grow.
Least of all the powerlifters amongst us.
Exactly. He's a powerlifter. He's, over 200 pounds. I can't even imagine the amount of calories he would have needed to get through just to get out of bed in the morning.
It's got to be a bit of a ride for Silsby, Texas, though, because... you look through the town when they show you footage of it, like his face is plastered on like half the signs there, like there's buses, all this stuff. He's basically saying like it was grassroots. Every club, every restaurant, every bar, every school was like raising and hustling to get money to get him to the Olympics.
You know what? I think he's being very modest again there, because that doesn't just happen.
No way.
Like, you don't, that's not how things work in life. Like, and seeing him perform as a powerlifter, like every time he wins a competition, he does a little dance. He flexes for the crowd. He has a twinkly eye, or he does his, finger guns. He's so charming. You can't help but be a fan of his.
Yeah.
And I think if you lived in Silsby and you saw him compete and you were like, that's my boy. He comes from here. He's going to be the strongest guy ever someday. Like, yeah, you would want to be behind him.
There's a little bit of magic to him. Like, the fact that he is bringing showmanship to a sport which it's a display of strength. There's usually very little in terms of the showmanship. I can imagine how many powerlifters have tried to do like the wink or whatever when they're lifted and they've fucking broken their arms in the process.
Yeah, and I think as well it can come across very smug.
Yeah.
And it doesn't with him. He just seems like he's having so much fun.
I like to see that because, I mean, there's so many instances, and I think it does happen. The man who's watched a lot of documentaries about boxers and stuff over the years, so he's probably a bit tunnel vision on it. What's so nice is that Terry Todd, who he says is a mentor and his father figure, and the man who basically had him on the straight and narrow in powerlifting, he wasn't trying to make him not be himself. He's a goofball as well, and seeing the two of them smiling when Mark's doing the dances and all that, it's like, right, this guy clearly gets Mark. It's not going to be like they're going to try and stop him from pursuing a career in wrestling, because he knows it's like everyone at this point knows he's going to WWE. He's not going to fucking the Olympics. Come on, like, seriously.
I mean, is he a wrestling fan as a child? Because they don't mention that in the documentary at all. Normally at this point you'd at least have one picture of him like wearing a Bret Hart t-shirt or something.
Okay, well, here's the embarrassing little story about Mark, which, again, another reason why wrestlers are like, let's bully him, where he gets the phone call, and I don't know how many times we've told the story on this podcast where the wrestler gets the phone call from Vince McMahon, like, hello, this is Vince McMahon, like, yeah, right, Junior, or like, hello, this is Pat Patterson, yeah, right, you hang up. So he gets the phone call, like, 95, right before he's going to the 96 Olympics, and he hangs up straight away because he thinks it's someone pranking to a silly Vince voice.
But Vince must, at this point, be used to this.
Yeah.
I think he loves that.
I'll get back at all these wrestlers for making fun of me on these phone calls by ruining their lives and controlling their careers in subtle ways. So yeah, he has to ring Vince back all like sad and be like, I'm sorry, Vince. And Vince offers him the big contract and all that. And allegedly Mark Henry's first words were, do I get to meet Yokozuna?
Aww.
And he's been offered, like, at the time, he says it's the biggest signing of all time.
Which is ridiculous. He's got no wrestling ability, no training, and it's not even like he has a background in athletics, because powerlifting isn't that. I mean, it's its own thing. It's to do with strength. It's not to do with, athleticism and flexibility and stuff like that. The typical things that wrestlers normally have a background in, like football or
that
gymnastics.
Gives you, like, football gives you a gas tank.
Yeah.
It gives you cooperation. It gives you, footwork. All these things which are, strength's important in wrestling.
Yeah, of course. But you can learn strength, right?
Yeah, and most of the strongest wrestlers in the world are like wrestlers who you don't even actually know are strong, because, it kind of, a lot of the way strength comes out in wrestling, at least as friends who I know who were into training and whatnot have told me, it's in the cooperation. It's in the stuff. They're not going to be like, look at the strength of Mark Henry cooperating there with Ryback on the suplex. They're not going to say that. Like, so it's not really a good investment. This is 1996 as well, though. This is when Eric Bischoff has got both feet up Vince McMahon's arsehole and kicking it on a routine basis. Bret Hart has been signed to a contract for 20 years where Vince is like, just so you know, I won't be able to pay you this. You're screwed. Like, they are threats of being kicked off their TV deal because they're not making enough, ratings, not making enough money at the moment. They are in the dark ages. This is when Scott Hall has decided, I'm going to go. Kevin Nash is like, I'm going to go. Like, everyone's deciding they're going to go. And Shawn Michaels decided, I'm going to go to a place where I do a lot of drugs and not be very nice to my colleagues. It's the worst time to be signing someone to a record-breaking. It's north of $500,000 was what I heard.
That's ridiculous. I mean, who am I to say what he should have been paid at this point? But the thing is, he says, I would have signed for $2.
There's your fucking problem. You over-offered, and you hate when that happens.
Yeah, I think the trouble is that there's a disparity between what Mark Henry would have happily been paid, which obviously he doesn't deserve to be paid as little as $2. I think we can all agree.
Yeah, there's a middle ground.
There's a middle
We're
ground.
talking about the pay gap here now, folks. Like, oh, fine, I'll just take $2 then if it's so bad for you.
But like similarly, I can only imagine that to all these wrestlers, we're in an industry where you're not supposed to be a fan because you're a mark then, and it means you fucking nobody. And in comes this mark with no wrestling ability.
Literal name, Mark.
Yeah, Mark. He's he's already got it up against him because he's African American. He's black. He's just strong, and I think especially the year he's being signed, as you say, because it's such the height of the competition. And yeah, all these wrestlers, their contracts are getting ended or, cut back, or they're told, no, not this year, it's not your opportunity, or you're too old, or we're not ready for you. And then suddenly...
we don't have enough money for it,
Yeah. And then suddenly in comes this guy who's like, I would have signed for $2. Also, I'm a massive fan. He freaks out. He wants to see Andre the Giant's boots.
Ugh.
He's just like, he's a super mega fan. And you can't even do that in wrestling. You have to pretend... Like you're not a fan, I think, to a point if you're new to wrestling, because otherwise you will just be labelled a mark and you'll be bullied.
I hope he didn't shake anyone's hands too hard or too soft as well, Joe.
He definitely did though, because he's so strong.
Jesus Christ! Like, it's just what I hate about this is that it kind of, you can see the blueprints that then kind of. I'm just taking my experience to be the experience of the typical like wrestling fan back in the day, because you hear this story of him being signed to all this money. And I was saying to you when I watched the documentary, like, there's reasons why I had, like, a fucking bee in my bonnet about him. And, like, two big reasons. I remember the story, like, Mick Foley's book, he's talking about, like, all the wrestlers who were making more money than him in 1996.
Yeah.
He's like, can you believe they're giving Mark Merrow $300,000 and they're giving Mark Henry all this money as well? He's not even trained, and I'm out here, jumping on concrete, and I'm making, like, a third of the money that they are. And, like, I get that resentment. And then you have, like, the great... classic story of Steve Austin where he's become stone cold, and he said Austin 316, he goes into the marketing room and they're like, oh, they're nothing but Mark Henry merchandise, posters, t-shirts, and he's like, how about a shirt for Stone Cold? And like, no, this is Mark Henry's WWE, mate. Like, I know what you're talking about. And like, yeah, surprisingly, the guy who was going to the Olympics, who had no wrestling training and was really nervous and was given all the money, was a bit of a flop when he first came.
And you know what? I think as well, even if he hadn't been offered all that money, I think he still would have probably been a victim of hazing, because of the fact that in wrestling, people who work in the industry are so, especially at this particular time, they're so hyper-conscious of the fact that people don't take them very seriously. Yeah. And so someone coming in with, oh, I'm legitimately one of the strongest men in the world. Like, you think of Vince McMahon alone. He was always tackling, like, Kurt Angle to take him down. Like,
you seem to be intimidated by someone's masculinity, Joe?
I think they'd be trying to prove that he's not such a big deal after all. And, oh, we're all just as tough as him. Because I just think of, like, JBL, and that's exactly the type of shit he would think and do.
Yeah, look, we will say they don't talk about the bullying much here. And the little clip that you mentioned of him and JBL laughing in the locker room, which they show 3 times, that was doing some serious fucking heavy lifting here in this stock, wasn't it?
Yeah, seriously. I did not appreciate the various to-camera interviews from JBL where he's, like, having a little giggle to himself about how much fun he had. Because Mark doesn't talk about the hazing, really.
He talked about it on Broken Skull sessions he did with Steve Austin, which I watched as well, and I listened to a couple of his interviews that he's done. Mark has spoken at length about pretty much all topics to his detriment. We'll get into later on, but he said the main thing about it was, and he's not many people want to be coming to him like, here's my personal role that I played in me being bullied. That's a difficult road to get to. Let's just say the difficult bridge to cross. But he's like, no one ever in my life ever before I came to WB, even as much as like attempted to look at me sideways.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how he was the king of Silsby and all that, and and that was kind of what it was for him. He was like, no one had ever bullied me before. I'd never been hazed. I'd never been talked back to. I'd never had a request denied. I'd never not gotten my way. And he kind of is trying to make out that like I was a bit of a spoiled brat. But also as well with stuff like I'd never had someone put a lock on my bag and then throw it into the showers and turn the showers on. And it's like, well, it's never happened to me either. And like, but that's fucking shit, isn't it? Or he's like, no one's ever like taken the keys to my car before and like, thrown them down the drain, or like no one's ever locked me out of the locker room, or you hear some stories about Mark Henry and it's like, fucking hell. And like, here I am in like the late 90s reading books where people are burying Mark Henry or talking about all the, entitled shit he was doing. You hear all these stories of bullying. And then I remember all through the thousands, a steady diet of shoot interviews where wrestlers would just brag about how they would, bully and haze Mark. There's a story which I laughed my head off so many times, and it's so fucking disgusting to think about. The fact that Mark's like, yeah, I played a role in all this. X-Pac took a shit in Mark Henry's meatball sandwich. No. An actual shit. They put the tomato sauce over it, mixed it around. And Mark just went and ate it. And, like, I'm not talking like these guys, like, had a come to Jesus moment and they're all fine with it. They're laughing their heads about it, like, 15 years later in shoot interviews.
Did he not get really ill?
I mean, imagine he would have, yeah. And, like, it's just kind of... If you're gonna, like, that's the ones you know about. And if he's talking like, oh, they threw my bags in the locker and then, were a bit mean to me, and people were like, we were shitting in his food... That shows to me that that's not just kind of a bit of hazing because he's a bit of an entitled galoot. Maybe he was a bit entitled, but it seems to me like he was an easy victim because it kind of felt like, well, I can do what I want to him because everyone's going to say, yeah, he's entitled. Yeah. Same reason why you can attack someone like Sable or half the women. Like, oh, well, everyone thinks they're an asshole anyway, so I can shit in a box or whatever,
Exactly, and he was an outsider.
Yeah.
He it's very easy to gang up on him, especially when you've got people from all the different corners of wrestling being like, well, that's not very fair, is it? Mick Foley's considered to be one of the nicest people. Him and Mark Henry are great friends now. And yet, even he was like, yeah, he maybe deserved it a little bit. Like, I think it's partly resentment from other wrestlers.
And it's a dangerous thing in wrestling, resentment.
Yeah. And partly the fact that I think a lot of wrestlers justify this type of behaviour as a rite of passage because it's something that they have, for the most part, all gone through some way or other. If you haven't been hazed by other wrestlers in the locker room, you've probably been hazed in your training. You've probably been, taken advantage of, beaten and abused, on your way up.
What did they do to you in that football team, JBL? What the fuck happened? Like, what made you this person?
Yeah, wrestling is an industry full of very damaged people. And I think the fact that Mark Henry came in so happy and, like, well balanced and happy in himself, they probably fucking hated that. They were like, well, let's ruin that for him.
What, he's got inner peace? No.
Can't be having that.
It always just reminds me of like that promo that Vince did that I was obsessed with, that we talked about in the Vince episode, where he's like, I see this inner peace you have and I don't want it and I can't buy it, so I want to kill it. It's like, that's kind of the mindset about a lot of wrestlers when they see someone who's just like happy in themselves. And like, think there would have been a way to be like, all right, Mark, like, you're a bit rough around the edges, let's kind of shore you up. I know there was no performance center back then, but yeah, it was kind of a long road for Mark of constant like haze, and the fact he was injury prone as well because of his lack of training. It really made for kind of bad vibes, I guess, kind of throughout. We decided to delve into Mark's career with the first match that he ever had in the WWF. It was his first match ever, and they put him up against none other than Jerry the King Lawler. And this is very much like if you're playing a wrestling game and you don't know how the controls work, it's like, right, you're going to have a special match against one of the commentators, and he's like, ha-ha, Mark Henry, hold B for a strong grapple. You're never going to be able to do your finishing move on me. Just stood still. It was like, if I had to do a wrestling match, I'd like Jerry Lawler in this exact phase to be my opponent, because I don't think Mark leaves his feet in this match at all. It's Mind Games in 1996. Mark Henry, the Olympian, taking on Jerry the King Lawler. I did have a little running tally here of how many subtle... What we got here? We had to expand it because the commentary got complex, but this is a tally of JR's digs, insults, and backhanded compliments. We had 6 in this 7-minute match.
I think we had more and we just missed them. And some of them are like, I think they're slow burners. It's kind of like that ancient martial arts move that kind of, it stops your heartbeat after you walk 10 steps. It's like, you don't even realise how much of an insult some of the things I think he was saying are until like a year from now.
Yeah, Mark,
hang on!
Walk 10 steps and he's like, wait a minute. He said I had a lack of finesse. That's a dig! Shit! Yeah, Jerry Lawler coming out to the ring here with the En Route stand-up, where they're also playing a video package from earlier in the day, and it's literally like, do you want to see Jerry Lawler going, and then another image of him going,
It was very hellish. I don't like that. Why did they do that? Have the clip of him going rah, 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 at the same time as having him literally in the ring going rah, rah.
So Jerry's gimmick was at the time, because everyone, if you played him on Attitude on the N64, he'd come out and be like, look at him, he's a moron. He'd just do the kind of the walking shot.
Yeah. He's not even very good at it.
I think, like, I'd rather him just come to the ring and then grab a mic and say what he's going to say. But the fact that he's like, you don't need to listen to this bit. It's like it's like the closing and opening bits of Seinfeld episodes. Like, you don't really pay attention to it,
But
do you?
it's like that if they played like the first bit and the last bit overlapping each other, so they're both playing at the same time and you can't hit either of them.
Yeah, at least they didn't do that in Seinfeld.
Yeah.
So he spilled coffee on him?
Through. I thought it was water.
He had a bag of McDonald's as well.
Oh, really?
I don't know. It was just Jerry Lawler with a bag of McDonald's going, ha ha ha, and throwing a cup of liquid on Mark. And Mark's like, look at me now. I'm going to have to go get changed into my wrestling gear for this match.
And then Jerry slaps him. And then Jerry goes on a rant about how he hates the Olympics.
I just love that. Like, you have all this like confusing noise and cut back. You're thinking Jerry Lawler in the ring. And another thing, I hate the Olympics.
Mad old man.
Why?
Okay. He says, the only reason I ever watch the Olympics is to find out if one synchronized swimmer drowns. Do they all drown? Which that's a recycled fucking joke. He's used that one many times before. Noel Fielding over here.
Yeah, well, as the man who's coming up on his 10 years of podcasting, I'll just keep my mouth shut. Yes, terrible.
At least your jokes are worth repeating. That was not even that funny.
Also, I genuinely never do it on purpose. He's doing it with malice of forethought there, Joe, the recycling of the material.
He's got a content calendar. He's planned it all in advance.
Don't take this out of context, but I will never knowingly recycle until the day I die. Jerry is all set here for his match, and Mark Henry comes out in his special tracksuit, and it's got the immediate air of Vince McMahon thinks this is the best idea in the world, and everyone around him, including the 10 or 15,000 people in attendance, don't share the sentiment. Because Vince is like going, whoa, look at Mark Henry. Yeah. And like, it's almost like he's trying to convince himself here.
Yeah.
Vince, like, he seems like he thinks he's got something here with Mark, which is no one else can seem to see it at the moment.
That's typical Vince, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess with strongmen, like, because you know, Braun Strowman is another person who fell into that category.
Yeah. Look, Vince, you got to remember Vince inside, he's a little scared boy who just wanted to be strong. He's living vicariously through these very strong men, his fantasy of being strong. All
right, I don't want to be gear shaming now, but well, actually, no, that's exactly what we're going to do. Mark Henry's outfit here.
Oh, it's really bad.
Oh, boy. Now, this is quite like the purchasing something on eBay or Alibaba, and it's coming from China, so you're not really sure if you know what it's going to look like. But, oh, God. They have tailors, don't they?
I assume they have tailors at this point. It doesn't seem like they helped Mark Henry at all.
How would you describe his outfit, Joe?
It's a bit like a lady's swimming costume. With an American flag kind of on it.
It's kind of a cut-out thing on the shoulder, but it's kind of stretched out there.
It's very much like an Alibaba version of a swimsuit you saw on ASOS that had gone out of style a few years back and is now like on offer.
Yeah, from Love Island Season 1. So Jerry has got the format of the match down. He's like, I'm going to teach Mark Henry some lessons in wrestling. Wrestlings. I like this is a good way to hide someone's shortcomings. You know, if you can't wrestle, have the guy be like, now we're going to do a headlock. I bet you can't even do one of those, Mark. Now put your arm around my head and just pretend to crank on it or it don't actually hurt me. I thought Jerry did all right here for his part. You weren't impressed with the King?
No, the most impressed I was at the beginning he falls over and lands on his elbows and he's not wearing any elbow pads. It looks really sore and I had a good time then.
Yeah, there is a lot to be said for both the catharsis of always watching Jerry Lawler get hurt, but also how this match was definitely set up. Jerry's like, 40 or 50 here. Like, this is like, don't worry, it'll be fine. No one's going to get hurt. And yet, in them doing like, do a headlock and then shove me over, or like, throw me to the outside. Jerry actually got seriously hurt almost in this match. I was watching like some commentary clips when they're talking about Mark Henry when they're doing the Hall of Pain, and Jerry's like, well, I remember the first match. I had Mark Henry's first match. And they're trying to sell it like it's scary, not like that Jerry was this kind of silly heel fighting the young Olympian. He's like, Mark Henry, he sidestepped me and I went over those top ropes and I went right up against the barricade. My face went straight up against it. I was lucky I didn't split my eye open. Like, he was just...
I wish he had.
Yeah, Jerry takes a fucking spill, which I don't think he was planning on doing. He goes fucking crashing.
Well, you know what? It's his own fucking fault because, in my opinion, in this match, Jerry simultaneously manages to oversell and undersell every move. Every single move. Like, the times when you really should be selling, he's underselling. He's not doing anything. He's, like, just still.
I don't buy Mark's power from what Jerry's doing in the match.
And what's really frustrating is I feel like he's doing this on purpose because I know how good Jerry can be with, like, very little effort. And it's not just a case, I'm sure, of him being nervous about wrestling this guy who's an amateur, even though he probably is a bit nervous, because that's Jerry Lawler. It's kind of his whole job.
Yeah.
Like, he's a veteran. He's supposed to be, like, one of the best in the industry.
And Mr. Safe, soft
Mr.
style.
Safe, yeah,
like,
Mr.
you know.
Mr. I can do anything with a look to the crowd. I can get the crowd to do what I like. And yeah, I'm really frustrated at his performance in this match.
It kind of had me sitting there going, I wanted Ric Flair to have Mark Henry's first match. Because,
yes!
you know, like, there's none of that kind of... Like, why wouldn't you have the spot where he goes to punch you and then he squeezes your fist? Why doesn't that happen? Like, there's so many bits like that where it's like, it's such an easy narrative. And I get it, like, Mark doesn't leave the center ground. Like, not only does he not leave his feet, he's pretty much, like, glued to the bullseye of the center of the ring, bar one or two spots in the corner. And... it's kind of sad that they don't give him enough opportunities to, like, get, like, there's obvious moments for the crowd to be like, yay! And they kind of fuck him all up. Like, the crowd are cheering and Mark turns and he's like, wait, what's going on? And then they stop cheering, like, because they're, like, out of embarrassment almost. I don't know. It's a bit of a shit show in terms of my first wrestling match with an allegedly safe pair of hands.
It's just inconsistent. Like, it felt like sometimes he was being, like, you know that match we did in the Hulk Hogan episode where Shawn Michaels buries him?
Yeah.
And he oversells? It felt like he was doing that at the worst time, like, just to make Mark Henry look shit. And then the times when, like, actually overselling would do a lot of good, like the times when Mark has him in something like a headlock or whatever, Jerry's just still. He just doesn't move. He becomes like a wet fish.
I think they were trying at the same time... They're trying to tell a story of, like, Mark's so strong, but also strength won't just do it, because you were annoyed at those spots where Jerry's in the headlock and he's like, and then he gets out and he has him in the hammerlock.
Because he didn't even sell anything.
That's the problem, yeah.
It's so obvious. He is just undermining Mark's strength.
Like, the headline should have been Mark Henry's strong, and the sub-headline should have been, like, Jerry Lawler shows that wrestling technique can sometimes outdo strength in wrestling. But we don't get that headline, really.
And do you know why I think we don't get that? Because to someone like Jerry Lawler, that would so bruise his ego, because he is strong. What do you mean? I am strong. I'm just as strong as Mark Henry. I don't need wrestling to win. I'm just super strong.
It very much felt like if you were asked to do a project for your work and you're like, all right, I know what they're asking me to do this because I'm the bitter teaching bile is coming out. I can see why you've asked me to do this because obviously I'm the only person who can do this, and I will do this, but I will do it in a passive aggressive way that makes you know that I have better things to be doing with my time. And that very much is what Jerry Lawler has here. Like, you know, it's kind of, he has done the job. You can't say he's not technically done the job.
Yeah, technically.
He's not sabotaged him overtly.
No.
But he's certainly not presented Mark Henry with a nice bow on him as the world's strongest man and the Olympian for everyone to go, yay!
Yeah, like, I think it sends a clear message to the locker room as to what Jerry thinks of Mark. And I think people like JBL in the back are going to see that match and they, you know, they know a lot more about wrestling than I do. And if I was able to pick up that Jerry wasn't trying for this, they definitely will. And they'll be able to go, well, he's supposed to be putting him over at least, you know, as the strongest guy, and Jerry's not even doing that. So let's all just fucking shit in his sandwiches, I guess.
Yeah, right. Seriously. So yeah, Vince has got the full big Vince voices. We get the backbreaker put in, and you know, impressive enough to see Jerry flipped up on his back, and Mark picks up the win. But in terms of like raw power stuff, that's, you know, meant to shock you and make you to go, whoa, in a wrestling industry that had already seen so many giants. And hey, over on the other show, they got a giant with a monster truck, and he's called the Giant. This seems like Like, it didn't seem like anything that you wouldn't have already seen a million times already on the WWF. And, like, after the match, they send out, like, Al Snow and Marty Jannetty, and the fucking grimace on the face. Fucking Sasha Banks been told that she's taking a little time off when they figure out what to do with her creatively. Triple H, oh my god, the fucking puss on his face.
He's so pissed off.
How would you describe Triple H when he was picked up for this press slam by Mark Henry?
Very still.
It's like he was doing his fucking taxes or something like that. He starts out like, no, and then he's picked up like, all right, Mark, couple more steps, couple more. All right, throw me here. Wee. Oh, come on. I know your friends are in another company, but chin up, mate. All right, come on.
I feel they're all working very hard together to make Mark look very bad.
Yeah, no more so than after all that happens, loads of fireworks go off and like legitimately takes the crowd off guard. They're like, huh? And Vince McMahon just goes, sure, why not?
Treat yourself.
These were meant to be for later on, god damn it. How would you rate this match then, Joe? This not easy to find Mark Henry matches from the offset, I'll say that, but this is definitely important for you to see, I think. But how would you rate it?
I gave it no stars.
Whoa!
And I don't blame Mark Henry. Like, yes, obviously he isn't great and he is very, very green, but I don't blame him for that. I blame the people who hired him and put him on a televised match. Like, if you don't think he's ready, don't do it. Don't give him a match and then bury him.
Yeah.
Like, the number of times on the commentary they're like, well, he's not very good, and of course, don't expect him to be good, and he's a bit shit, actually.
Like, the tally there, and I mean, all through the Attitude Era, it was a running gag where we were on the Attitude Era podcast, we're like, listen to Jim Ross talk about, like, Vader or Mark Henry or literally anyone who's heavyset ever, like,
really?
it's just fucking so... predictable. As predictable as us doing that shit in the first season of the Attitude Era podcast. But, like, we're at this point, like, right at the start from the get-go. It's like lack of finesse, don't expect anything fancy, not going to be very pretty. He's got a lot to prove, hasn't shown us much yet. He's one step away from the classic, don't break out the star rating for this one, folks. Clearly, because no stars were given.
I blame Jerry, I blame Vince, I blame everyone else in the locker room except for Mark.
Yeah, like, it's one of those cases where you ever seen a talent show and the kid goes up and says, I'm going to read a poem about seashells in front of all the bullies. It's like, all right, well, who fucking put him up to this?
Yeah, exactly.
It's their fault, ultimately.
Yeah, like, I feel Mark did the job he was supposed to do. I don't think he was supposed to move around and get off his feet. I don't think anyone wanted him to do that. And he did his job. He was a strong man. He lifted the Jerry.
I lifted the Jerry, and all I got was his t-shirt. I think after this point now, and we're in the documentary, they're talking about the hazing and kind of the justification for bullying, really. And it's always good to hear from the bully's perspective why they thought it was right that they did the bullying.
It's important to see both sides of the story.
And you're here one second talking about, he didn't know, or he didn't appreciate, he didn't know what the sport wrestling, he didn't appreciate how great it was. It's like, well, first of all, he was a fan, so he obviously had to have some level of appreciation.
Yeah.
But I think what it is it's that jealousy, it's the resentment. And then the other thing, which is the label of unreliable because he gets injured. Now, I don't know why it is where we're still in the world where Mark Henry gets injured a bunch and he's considered to be unreliable and injury prone. And, Batista and Randy Orton spent most of the peaks of their career routinely getting injured, and they're the greatest of their generation. I don't know what that could be, folks, but...
I don't know.
Him getting injured, and particularly getting injured right before the Olympics, I didn't know this at all, that he had suffered like right before, much like Kurt Angle had got injured right before the Olympics, and Mark underperformed at the Olympics. I don't know if he actually came last, but he says later on, I've only ever lost one powerlifting competition. I think it's this. It's the
really?
1996 Olympics, which is the same year Kurt would have been competing. So they would have been part of Team USA together.
Wow, God. How did the WWE not, cash in on that?
I mean, why would you do that, Joe, when you could casually bury him with a throwaway line on a SmackDown and then never make reference to it again?
What's the... I thought they were supposed to love America. Well, it's not very loving of America if you're, burying their Olympic heroes.
They never bring up. And I think they never brought it up because they didn't want to be like, oh, let's not bring up the thing where he did badly.
Right.
It's not like Chad Gable, who similarly really underperformed at the Olympics. He's an amazing athlete, but he wasn't taking home no medals. But, we get to talk about him being a great Olympian and all that stuff. I'm not sure if it's because Mark has more legitimate kind of claims to fame.
Right.
But, I didn't know that he was Olympian when I was growing up. I didn't know that at all until he was made fun of it. Made it seem like it was a big, dirty secret.
So what did you think... What did you think he was signed for wrestling for, then? Did you not know that he had...
I figured he was a strong man. I figured he did powerlifting, but I figured that meant that, he lifted a few heavy things and... therefore it meant he in no way was prepared for the sport of wrestling.
What, and he thought he was just paid this record-breaking amount of money for just general kind of strength?
I'm going back to those books again because it's, in terms of the documentation of the time, you're talking about, kind of the biggest wrestlers of the day speaking their piece, ghostwritten or otherwise. But the theory seems to be, and that's what I ate up, was that Vince McMahon thought there was big dollars in just the Olympic brand and saying, look, we're professional wrestling. There is this other world of wrestling, and I want to have a bit of that because Olympics fever had struck in, the early 90s particularly. I think from 92 onwards, Vince had this thing in his head that we could get an Olympian and it's going to be the biggest thing in the world. And it wasn't with Mark. It wasn't.
But he didn't even say any of it, so why would it be?
I mean, they are saying here,
but
the match and all
20...
that.
Oh, well, I get what you mean, the Jerry Lawler match.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying it here when he's off to the Olympics, but once he goes to the Olympics, that's it. We never talk about it again.
Right.
I mean, you never got it, though, because Kurt didn't really get that. He's an Olympian, isn't it great?
No, but he says it himself. He goes, I'm an Olympic gold medalist.
Ooh.
It's his whole thing. And he wears his gold medals to the ring. It's part of his whole branding.
And it was a heel character as well. I don't think it ever could have worked, them having, Mr. Olympics, who's the goodie who went to the Olympics.
Although, you know what? Actually, I disagree because I think if anyone could have done it, it's Mark Henry.
Yeah.
Mr. Twinkly Charming Mark Henry, genuinely the strongest man in the world.
He had a few more years of training under his
belt.
Yeah,
exactly. If they'd just been a bit cleverer about when to push him, if they'd just those 5 years where he's learning as he goes, if they'd just done that kind of off camera, I think he really could have been a legitimate the Olympian character face, the way that Kurt never could have been.
He says at this point, he had a bad attitude by now because he was I'm the worst loser in the world. He was embarrassed by what happened at the Olympics, and it was kind of meant to be implying that he was using that anger and disappointment to kind of right, I'm going to focus onto wrestling. He did improve in those years, but he was still, if you're listing people who are on TV in terms of wrestling skills and ability, he'd be right towards the bottom, really. Yeah. But, you can make the argument that, like China, he had such a unique look and presence that he should have been on that show, irrespective of actual wrestling ability. We saw a lot of clips of him training.
Yes.
And it was shocking.
With everyone.
Yeah.
They pulled out all the stops, literally every wrestler.
It was funny. I think we were watching it and you were like, oh, isn't it amazing that they had... people like Albert and Edge. I'm like, those are his classmates. It just seems to be, from what we watch, every class was set up we're all going to help Mark.
No wonder
here's Dory Funk Jr. and Dr. Tom and fucking everyone, And
I do wonder if it's just it's just a clip taken out of context. You don't know, if it was just they were taking it in turns to train and wrestle.
Patterson was there too.
Or if it's a case of they were all training and then it was okay, well, Mark's so crap, we have to all stop now and just all help Mark. Because you don't know. And if it is the latter, that again would kind of make you understand a bit more how they resent him. Because if he's kind of taking up the majority of the training time, you would kind of be a bit bitter.
It reminded me, I mean, I know you've done panto and stuff. I don't know if it ever happened to you, but when we were in school, we did the field for our second to last year. It was our big play, Irish classic and all. And we had a friend in our group who were he's not the best actor, but he is so the actual character that he's meant to be in. He is pretty much the character in the play, and
right.
we just know that if he could put two and two together, he'd be fucking great. And he really struggled, but we were so convinced, and he was as well a little bit, that he could do it. And we spent a lot of our times we were rehearsing let's just help this guy because we know if this works, it'll all work. And it did in the end, but we had to do a lot of work, and a lot of times it was behind the directors and back to be we just have to make sure he's up to snuff because we're worried he'll get cut. And I do get that sense of we're all in this together and this person's kind of not on the same level, but we really, really want them to be. It's fucking exhausting, though. I mean, I was a kid when I was doing that. You know, I don't think I'd be able to do that these days.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's probably a bit less like we're all in this together. If that one person is being paid 10 or 20 times your salary,
Yeah.
with like none of the experience.
Again, that's where the resentment bubbles in from the ground up. Like, I can't imagine what someone like Edge thinks. He's got 0 slashed off of his money compared to Mark Henry, I would imagine.
That's like wrestling, though. You'd think like these idiots, trouble is they all have concussions, but like you think they'd be able to put 2 and 2 together and go, what's the common link? Oh, it's Vince McFucking-Man. Maybe
better hate Mark Henry then.
Better hate Mark Henry.
Like, you know, I'll never begrudge anyone who gets paid money by someone who's going to pay it to them. You know, it's if it's Vince McMahon who's doing
Take
that,
the
like
money.
it's not your issue what someone else's bank account looks like.
If you got an issue, bring it up with Vince. Oh, what's that? You're scared? Well then, that's your own fucking issue, isn't it?
Well, it turns out I had an issue. I brought it up with Vince and I walked out with a pay cut. And now I think it's a really good idea.
Here's an idea for all those wrestlers who like want to be paid as much as Mark Henry. Become the world's strongest man. There you go, easy.
Or go in with your dad and then he loses all power. Because Vince is like, who's this guy? He's like, he's my actual dad. Like, you won't know what to do then, Joe. He'll revert into his original state.
I have no idea what you're referencing.
The fact that Vince McMahon always makes himself be your weird father figure.
Oh, right, yeah.
Actual dad with you, bulletproof.
Yeah, I see.
Try me, Vince. I've got my dad. He is put into the Nation of Domination. This is one of the kind of age-old things that you do in wrestling where you got a nice big faction, you got kind of the veteran, you got a couple people there to be like the heavies, and then maybe there's 1 or 2 people who are in there to kind of be polished up for the next generation. And the benefit of the Nation of Domination is that no less than 3 people in that group thought that they were the person who was going to be like kind of polished up and be the next guy. It obviously was The Rock and not Mark Henry, but he says that it was the learning tree times a million going into the Nation of Domination.
Yeah, because he says he learned loads from The Rock, which, yeah. I mean, it's funny that Rock's being the one who's, he's the chosen one to be the big star, and yet The Rock is like the mentor.
Never heard anyone ever say remotely anything like that with The Rock, that he was, helping out and all that jazz.
Probably too busy helping Mark Henry. But mind you, that actually makes me like The Rock more, because if everyone else was hazing Mark Henry and The Rock was like, probably able to see that and go, well, I'm an up-and-coming star. I've got a lot of, I've got family connections in this business. I am really well connected and privileged to be where I am. Plus, I've got the raw talent. Yeah, I will help this guy.
What was really cool about it was that Mark and The Rock used to travel on the roads together.
Oh, right.
And I was reading up some interviews and he was like, yeah, it was always a pain traveling with The Rock because he always insisted on taking a VCR and his tape collection everywhere he went. So he could, when they go to the hotel, they plug in the VCR. He'd make Mark watch the matches back and they'd critique him together. It's kind of like DDP, but you've got a friend, so it's less weird.
Yeah.
And they kind of sidestepped greatly what the Nation of Domination was all about. They played the music, and then they're like, the Nation of Domination, man, the demeanor of that group was, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And that's what I liked about them. And I was like, it's not really what the Nation of Domination was about, but whatever.
So what was the Nation of Domination?
The Nation of Domination, Joe, was one nation under Farouk with liberty and justice for none. The idea was that it was every fear a white person would have after reading half of a headline about black nationalism, and then they thought, this is what it is, and Vince Russo made a storyline out of this.
Oh my god, okay.
Look, here, there's things that work for it and against it, and I'm kind of halfway through looking at it on the After Your podcast in stasis, so I can't really give you the full scoop. Was it like kind of deliberately done to stoke that racial tension, you know, in the same way that Goldust was used to stoke the homophobic tension and whatnot? Right. Very much was that. It's like, oh, you're scared of black people, are you? Well, here's black people and they're going to talk about taking over the world. It used things like by any means necessary, like a lot of Malcolm X verbiage. They did the black power fist and salute.
But they were made to be heels.
100% heels. 100% heels. The other side, you can argue, it got a lot of black talent on screen who otherwise wouldn't have gotten to be on screen. It provided a platform for them to be able to talk about issues in wrestling specifically. Like Ron Simmons would speak at great length, very articulately, about how it's a racist business, even though Ron Simmons himself does not subscribe to that viewpoint.
Oh.
But, you know, it gave people like The Rock a platform, and Mark Henry and D'Lo and that. And they all loved doing it together because they all got to hang out together and be friends.
Irony of Ron Simmons, who doesn't think that the WWE is racist. The Rock, who believes he transcends race.
Yeah, Owen Hart was in there at one point as
What?
well. So, yeah, let's stop trying to figure out the Nation of Domination at that point, I'm thinking, you know.
It's like such a racial angle, and yet you've got some of like the least fussed about racism black individuals in this team.
It's probably one of the only reasons why they did it, to be honest.
That's true, actually. Yes.
Ron Simmons is an interesting one. Farouk, best pals with JBL in real life, you know, and I do believe their kind of viewpoints, particularly JBL's on like racism in wrestling, very much the old school idea of what we came to this conclusion in 1997. You know,
yes. Racism ended in 1997.
I don't see colour, he said into the abyss.
We have equality now.
So the one quote I got from Mark about Ron Simmons was, he's the first man I ever met where I had to give pause about how I would beat him up. Because he's like he was like, I'm not being like big-headed or anything, but literally every time I'd ever seen anyone in my life before, there was no question in my mind if we got into a fight, I'd like rip their fucking arms off. And, you know, he just knew that he was stronger than everyone. But Ron Simmons, he'd see him in the locker room and he'd just catch himself being stared at, because Mark would be there going, what would I actually do? Like, if I was to fight him, how would I go about it? Because he's very strong and very fast. And like, Ron would look up and be like, what are you looking at? He's like, oh, nothing. He's like, you're trying to fight me again, aren't you? Like, no, not at all. And that's kind of, there was a serious hierarchy there, I think, in that group. It was good for him to be with a veteran, I guess, to kind of give him like the discipline of training and all that jazz. But the Nation of Domination is something which I don't think the WWE are ever going to talk about in great length. I mean, because Mark Henry and the Nation of Domination are one of the few people who had blackface parodies done of themselves in the WWE. And they're not talking about X-Pac, the man who also shat in his sandwich, you know, blacking up.
God.
And you know, I'm not here to be calling everyone out and all that. I'm just saying what people said, and that was in their hearts at the time. They all have platforms now. They're all on Twitter. They all have podcasts. I'm sure that I haven't listened to every episode of X-Pac 1, 2, 3, 60. Maybe he's addressed it. Maybe he's apologized. Mark seems to be totally at peace, by the way, with all the bullies and all the shit he's put up with over his years.
That's typical, like...
Because he's had success, though, as well. That really's got to, you know...
And, like, as we were saying, like, The Rock, Ron Simmons, like... And even, like, I think if you go so far as to, like, with people like... I'm not very familiar with Booker T, but I'm pretty sure Booker T even is a little bit like that. There are certain very high-profile black wrestlers from the WWE who have just been, like, convinced that racism doesn't exist anymore.
Or just they struggle to see where, like...
Because it doesn't affect them, it doesn't affect anyone else. It's like...
You mentioned Booker T there and, like, Mark Henry. The comments from both of those men about Leo Rush, when Leo Rush was like, I'm experiencing like a bit of institutionalized racism here, and like
both of them were like, no.
Well, like, look, it ended with Mark Henry saying he's going to sue Leo Rush.
Jesus Christ.
And you know, we'll get into it in the tweets, but there were some people who are like, you know, I love Mark, but I'm really disappointed that he's become like quite a shill for the company.
Yeah.
And like Mark is very passionate about, you know, racial equality. In his Hall of Fame speech, it's the first thing he says about equality of, you know, race, gender, what, you know, physical ability, backgrounds of any sort. He lives and breathes it, but it's always, you have to bear in mind that corporate filter of WWE.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's, I mean, they do it to, like, you know, women of the past as well. Like, you have these women who are treated like shit.
Trish Stratus is, like, doing a lot of work there to make you know that she's okay with that, all the shit she did with Vince, and that makes it okay.
Yeah, it's not sexist, actually, because I'm a woman and I'm saying it's not. Like,
but it works, though, as well. That's the thing,
work,
it has weight.
But also, it's like, just to make it very clear that you can't speak on behalf of all other people.
Yeah, it's very much the case. And I'm like, I'm not saying that any individual wrestler that we mentioned there has got it completely right or completely wrong. It's just that I feel the tendency of certain wrestlers to shut down chats about racism and stuff like that is very strange.
It's probably the only reason, I just say the only reason, it's probably one of the big reasons they're all as successful as they are, because the ones that did speak out probably got fired.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, like, Mark had no shortage of issues in his time, but I think with Mark, it was coming from a lot of different places, you know? And that's the thing I always come back to. It's like, hey, who's to say why a wrestler did like one of those limitless, horrible, mean pranks did it to Mark because, you know, there was a racial aspect to it, but it's kind of disguised away because it's like, well, actually, no, it's about him being injury prone and him getting too much money and him being a disappointment and the Olympics thing and all that, you know? It feels like his experience, even though he experienced a lot of bullying, is not the typical experience of, like, if you were a young black wrestler coming into WWE a couple of years ago. And I think, you know, before you get up in arms about it, just read, like, Leo Rush's comments about it. We talked about this on our Patreon at the time when it was happening, but he was talking about stuff like, is it right for me to have to go and get like big crates of fucking water for like my mostly white colleagues and
also,
stuff, you know?
Like being made to do it in front of fans, like being sent out
Not
as a performer, in character to go out and do menial tasks that is normally, you know, expected of like an intern, not a superstar. It's humiliating.
Yeah, I think they're not going to have a conversation about that aspect of things because I think Mark doesn't seem to view it as part of his story here, and that's that. You can't like expect it to be always. It just that's his viewpoint on it. It is sad, it is bad when a lot of the time you're just like, I hope that the issue never comes up, so I don't have to hear him talk about it. I'm fucking talking about like one of the most iconic African American wrestlers of all time, and I'm like, please, no one bring up anything about it because I'm worried what he's gonna say. I feel that about Booker T a lot of the time as well. It's just fucking wrestling, isn't it?
It's so wrestling.
It says more about wrestling than them as people, I think. We got into some of Mark Henry's more kind of character-based moments now, and he's kind of realizing, right, I've got kind of shortcomings in the ring, but maybe let's lead into that personality a little bit. It's hard to remember a time where he wasn't like sexual chocolate or he wasn't the guy with the twinkle in his eye, but for like around a year or two, Mark was just this like solemn heavy in the background who just hit people and didn't really have much character at all.
Boring.
Very boring. And like I always loved the date segments with him in China. It's one of my favorite stuff ever. But I was very shocked to see like the little extended takes we got in this documentary.
That was so good. Vince in D'Lo's hat. So D'Lo is asked to be Mark Henry's limo driver for the date with China.
I love it starts off with him like, I got you a cool suit. He's like, awesome. Like, cool glasses, like cool.
Nice.
And he got the chauffeur's hat.
What?
Like, what?
And you get to see just some glimpses in this documentary of Vince telling D'Lo and Mark kind of like what to do, and you see him put on the hat and he pulls this little face, and it's so funny. I love it. It just makes me think of all the footage that is out there somewhere.
Yes, of Vince directing and
it's
having fun.
Favorite stuff to see.
He clearly thinks that Mark Henry as an entertainer is way more bankable at this point than Mark Henry, the Olympian or the athlete or whatever.
And, I can totally see why, because him and Mark have a very similar sense of humour. Like, they're both quite juvenile and immature with what they find funny, and I don't necessarily mean that as a harsh criticism, because I think there can be upsides to that as well. But they just both seem to have fun, like, coming up with ideas together. Like, it's just something they both get.
I think sexual chocolate being pitched to Vince from Mark is like, it's the exact coalescence of their two like very juvenile senses of humor.
Honestly, I thought sexual chocolate was something Vince came up with and then pitched to Mark. I didn't realize until we watched this documentary that it was the other way around.
Yeah, they used to just like, apparently they'd be driving in the cars cutting like silly promos and all that, and he started referring to himself as sexual chocolate, and everyone's cutting up and thinking it's the funniest thing ever. So before you know it, here he is on TV. He's sexual chocolate. And like, it's such a weird gimmick because there's so many facets to it. Like, they want you to believe now that it was just like, he's a ladies' man. Mark, he liked the ladies, man. Yeah, he likes the ladies. Like, the original pitch of Sexual Chocolate was that Mark was a sex addict to the point where they explained why he underperformed in wrestling and made mistakes and was gassed all the time. It's because Mark was with the ladies. That's why he can't wrestle more than 5 minutes. I'm like, all right, that's really fucking shit. But like, I get why you're doing it. They did all these segments that me and Adam had to watch where he went to sex therapy. And it's like, I lost my virginity when I was like 9 years old. I'm sexually attracted. We're watching Trailer Park Boys, and it's like, when Randy's like, I'm seeing all this stuff bubbles. I'm kind of confused. It's like, well, there's this type of thing here. And then there's this as well. And he's like, well, I kind of like it all. And that's kind of what Mark's meant to be, like, attracted to everything.
Did you actually have him in segments with, like, not women then?
Well, he first has Dr. Andrea Early, who is his sex therapist, which we believe is some sort of a sex joke. And he starts coming on to her, and he's like, and, like literally the first segment is like, "Hello, Mark, I'm your sex therapist." He just like goes to grab and kiss her, like, "No, just sit down. I'm your sex therapist. We're going to talk." Like, "Oh, okay." And the twist they do at the end is he has like weeks and weeks of sex therapy, and at the end it's like, "Thanks, doctor. You made me realize that I'm a very sexual being. I have a very large appetite, and I just need to like keep up with my own appetite." And it turns out it's the Godfather, like the pimp hand. He's like, "Yeah, exactly. That's what we're talking about." And really glad you came to sex therapy, Mark. We kind of figured it all out here together. So like he went to a pimp for his sex therapy was the gag at the end.
What, to have sex with the pimp?
No, he didn't have sex with the pimp, Joe.
But like you're saying that he would have sex with whoever, so like he wasn't straight, right?
Yeah, like hot girls, sexy girls, Godfather's hoes.
So that's also sexy girls.
That's how WWF pitched it, you know? It's just like, and then it's Mae Young! He's into Mae Young, can you believe it? What? It wasn't as if he was out like this pansexual deity or anything like that.
Waste.
And that's the thing, you can recap Sexual Chocolate in 20 different ways and come to 20 different conclusions of what the gimmick was. But I think what it was mostly was taking quite very serious issues and then making light of them. Like, that is the heart of what it was. Because sex addiction is, I mean, fucking hell, that's not an easy life to be living, is it?
No, but that's, again, it's very Vince McMahon does wrestling, because
Imagine being addicted to sex.
he hears this thing that's a serious issue but sounds funny to a 10-year-old, and he goes with it as a funny thing because he is a 10-year-old inside.
The kind of low light of the whole Sexual Chocolate Mark Henry ladies man thing, and I think we may have brought this up before on a live show, but they did this whole thing where Chyna's like, "Oh, Mark, I'm going to set you up with my friend. You're going to really like her." And Mark meets this lady, and he's like, "Oh, this is great." And they have a lovely date and all that. And then it gets hot and heavy, and he's like, "Oh, she has a penis." And he runs off, like, literally show him getting sick.
So he's not, like, into everyone then.
No,
That's
of course
just a fucking
no.
lie.
Just a bullshit thing that they say. And
that
like,
would have been so cool, though. Like, if they...
wrestling's ready for it, baby.
I don't even know if it is. I mean, the fans, I think we're ready. But WWE, I don't know if they're ready.
Vince McMahon has to die first, I guess.
Definitely.
It's not just the fact that it's like, "Oh, she had a penis," and he runs off like, and he's all like fucking screaming. They literally afterwards, it's him gagging, getting sick, and then they cut to his mother in the front row crying. It's like, "All right, Vince, we figure out what your opinion is on transgender people or whatever. Like, grand." And like, I hate it as well because there was some documentary about the Attitude Era. And Mark did try to explain it. He's like, "Hey, I know it was tasteless and all that, but I had, like, you know, people come up to me and say, 'Well, thank you for having that on screen because it was representation.'" Like, get the fuck out, Mark.
Fuck off.
Your values don't comply with this. You don't have to pretend that they fucking do.
Also, I really am bothered. I know it's not the point. I am bothered by the laziness of that storytelling.
Yeah.
Like, because they are trying so hard to be edgy and alternative, and yet here they have an opportunity to actually be alternative by having a character who is a supposed sex addict have sex with whoever and not make a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
And it would have been progressive, alternative, and shocking at the time.
Yeah.
And they didn't fucking do it because they were like, women with penises. Ah, ha, ha, ah.
I always kind of think if he didn't have this gimmick, Sexual Chocolate, and all it entails, the nice bits and the ugly bits, you know, if it didn't have all of that, his career would have been fucked. But I really, really think the reality is if Mae Young hadn't come along, it would have been triply fucked. Because I think when people think of Sexual Chocolate, they think of the hand being born, and then they think of Mae Young and Mark together and that kind of odd couple, which, having watched and rewatched, like, it warms my heart. I love the Mae Young Mark Henry pairing.
It's a very good balance of kind of edgy. Because she is a really old woman, and it is quite shocking to see this, like, massive sex addict wrestling strongman character have rampant sex with this old lady. And then the stuff with the giving birth to a hand. Like, it's tasteless and shocking in a way that doesn't actually offend anyone. And this is the sweet spot, I think, of wrestling that we all kind of feel quite nostalgic about, even if we haven't grown up with it.
Because you look back at it, it's like, okay, it's a hand, but, like, it's not as if anyone's having fucking... You know, having a pop at them for no reason, you know?
It's not going to result in hate crimes.
Everyone involved thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
No more so than Vince McMahon himself, who refuses to this day to explain himself. The reason behind it, in case you've not checked out our Mae Young episode, is It's a hand.
Yeah, Mark says in this documentary, he's like, I asked Vince, is there meaning behind it? Is there a metaphor? Is there some kind of like secret subplot that you have planned? It's a hand. And it's a really gooey hand. It's all covered in like placenta.
Yeah. Nope, not good. Not good at all. Not good. I don't like that goo. I don't like talking about that goo. It upsets me. The goo on the hand upsets me more than the hand itself, or the concept of someone giving birth to a hand. If it just a clean hand came out, I'd probably think it's one of my favourite segments of all time.
Oh, no, the goo is what makes it really funny. Because it kind of makes it more realistic, because it's the placenta. Yeah, because Vince... Look, I'm sorry you just don't understand me the way Vince does. He gets it. Look, because why would it just come out otherwise? That makes no sense. She's giving birth to a hand.
Yeah.
If you give birth, there's going to be placenta, blood. It's funny. It's
a
hand.
I know I said it in the Mae Young episode, but if you're someone who fucking tweeted me back in the day angry about how it was obviously meant to be a sex toy from the 30s, seriously fuck off. What a waste of breath.
It's a hand.
It's a hand.
It's a hand.
The end. And I like how they set up from there, and then they were like, yeah, at the time as well, they thought that I had bad psychology. You cut to someone else. Mark was lazy at the time, quite frankly. So we sent him to OVW to learn how to actually wrestle. Now, this was some grim footage here. You were like, what the fuck is this? Like, it was showing the old clips of OVW of Mark talking with Jim Cornette on low res quality. It was the old training grounds for back in the day.
So it's kind of like a developmental promotion?
A little bit like half developmental, half finishing school. Third half is it's an actual local kind of... Yeah, we're actually in Kentucky here. We're going to put on some wrestling shows at the weekend. We have local TV. It was its own self-sufficient company in that respect, in that it made its own talent and its own stars, and then they would send people down like, hey, here's this young kid, Brock Lesnar or Randy Orton, make them into a star, make them ready for TV. Or in the case of Mark Henry, and it also happened to the Big Show, this guy ain't good anymore. Make him a proper wrestler. It's humiliating, I think, because he's there in his like sexual chocolate gear trying to get a new gimmick going. He's like, I'm the best wrestler in the world, and everyone's like, ha ha, Mark Henry gave birth to a hand.
Yeah, why would they not just keep like why did Vince make him sire a hand, which is obviously something Vince thought was really good and funny, and then was like, I've changed my mind. Go after me.
That was Vince there talking about what he was going to do.
I just don't understand, like, why, if he loves the gimmick so much, loves the storyline, the angle, why not keep it at OVW? Okay,
so my theory with this is because people on the internet can't help themselves with doing Vince McMahon booking sex analogies. Like, yeah, so here what it is. Vince McMahon does something like that. What's happening here? Mark Henry going over to Ohio Valley Wrestling. This is Vince turning over after he's had his fun now and going to sleep.
Oh,
lights off. He don't care now. He's got nothing else to do with Mark Henry. He's done his big funny thing.
He's had his fill.
You're not going to top that. The sexual chocolate character literally peaked at that moment, and it's true. How can you follow up from that? You can't. I think...
So send him away.
Send him away with no real... That's the thing, though, about Mark. Mark got sent away many times with no real plans to bring him back. I always thought it was like, they're waiting for him to break. Like, they're waiting for him to go, fuck this. I know I'm being paid well, but I'm going to break off the golden handcuffs and just go do my thing. And they don't have to pay him anymore. But they were making a lot of money at the time, so I guess there was no skin off their nose.
Yeah.
But he says this was the darkest period in his life because... He was in Ohio Valley Wrestling. He knew that he was floundering. He wasn't progressing the way he felt he should be. His mom had just passed away. And he said as well, in the strongman community, people were calling him out.
Yeah. The other strongmen were getting very annoyed that he had called himself the world's strongest man, like as his gimmick.
Yeah. And I wonder how much that is them actually being upset. And the other thing is like them being like, I know this is good publicity for me to call out a wrestler who won't be able to do anything about it.
Oh, I think it's a bit of both, but like I think it's all that stuff we were saying about wrestling and how they have to overcompensate because they feel they have something to prove. I think it goes the other way as well, in that people think that wrestlers do have something to prove because it's fake.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of powerlifters, strongmen, who are legitimately some of the strongest people on this planet, would look at this professional wrestler and go, Yeah, okay, he had a bit of success in his youth, but he's not the world's strongest man, is he?
He's given, look what he's doing on TV now.
Yeah,
That's
he's
probably
giving birth to a hand.
Look, here's me with the odd time where I think Vince McMahon is such a master puppeteer, where I wonder if he's like, and if I keep doing this, putting him in gimmicks and angles like this, the strongman community will start calling him out, and then he'll probably want to go away and prove him wrong. And like, Mark is this I really hope that's not the case, just because like Mark's emotions here, he said, this is the first time in my life I had hate in my heart.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. So he wants to go off and basically prove him wrong. Like, he just wants to put a pause in the wrestling career. I'm going to go off now. He'd been injured, he'd come back. You know, they tell you about like probably a quarter of the injuries that Mark actually gets in his career in this doc. And he's like, right, I'm going to go off now. I'm going to train for, he only had 3 or so months to actually do it. And I'm going to go enter the Arnold Classic.
Yeah, who was it they interviewed? Was it Big Show, I think? And he was like, normally in these competitions, you train for, half a year to a year, maybe.
Yeah,
to
camp
prepare,
at least, yeah.
To prepare your body, your mind, get your diet straight. Like, it takes a huge amount of your life to prepare for this. And Mark took 3 months.
And he was in the middle of burying his mother at the time as well.
Fucking
which is
hell.
is unbelievable. And just in case there's not enough pressure on you to go and enter into that world and try and prove a lot of naysayers wrong and like kind of prove yourself to be a better version of you when you were younger, fucking pressure alone. He goes to Vince and says, hey, I want to go and compete in the Arnold Classic and try and legitimately gain the title of World's Strongest Man. And Vince says to him, just so you know, there's no room in the World Wrestling Federation for the second strongest man. So basically, you lose, you're out of the family. Fuck me.
I mean, he's not wrong, is he? After
Still.
branding himself as the world's strongest man, you can't then go off and prove that you're not.
Because, yeah, I mean, Vince is like, you might as well just stay here and, like, keep using the branding. Other than, like, you're just going out to risk the branding. You'll either make it stronger or,
You'll ruin it entirely.
I think it was do or die, because at that point in time, I think if Mark hadn't done something like this, there was no upside from, I think, it still being in wrestling.
That makes me think, though, that Vince did all this intentionally, because, like, as you say, like, where does he go after this, if not legitimately legitimizing his strongest man Noma?
And, like, I think... Like, I think this a little. And I would say only a little, because I think it's used as a stick to beat everyone over the fucking head with, least of all if you're under the age of 35. But a little adversity is good for the soul. I say a little adversity.
Yeah.
And Mark had success come to him, not say like it wasn't work or anything like that, but it came quite naturally to him because he had such strong support from his community, from his trainers, from his family. How many times we used to do an episode in this show and it's like, oh, everyone doubted him, everyone said it's a bad idea. Opposite of that.
Yeah.
So I think it was the first time in his life where he was really up against, like, where people were like, you can't do this, you're not good.
Well, not first time. Second time after he joined the wrestling industry, I guess.
But it's okay for wrestling, I guess, because it's like, well, I'm still young in this business and all respect, brother, and all that. But to be like, you can't do this, and it's like the thing that you got signed for that people say that you got paid too much in the first place, that's like, they're coming after his fucking identity here,
Yeah.
So I think this was really important for him to do it, to actually
I think
go
so.
out.
I think Vince realised that as well. I think I'm not saying I think Vince went and murdered Mark Henry's mum, although I'm not saying he didn't, because I wouldn't put anything past
Joe.
Vince, but I think he did kind of like put things in place to make a character shift happen by either making or breaking it.
Yeah.
And I think Vince does that a lot.
Oh, yeah, he's very good at moving the chess pieces so that those circumstances arise. Listen to anything we said about Bret Hart or just half the fucking wrestlers on the roster we've done episodes on. And yeah, if Vince McMahon's in their career, he's probably done it at some point.
Yeah.
The couple of videos that we watched a lot of footage from the Arnold Classic, watching him do things which had previously never been done before. And yeah, we ain't strongman competition aficionados, but watching him lift the Thomas Inch dumbbell,
Ugh.
that thing was like 180 pounds, and it has the smallest handle in the world. It looks like a cartoon weight from the fucking Beano, and he lifts it over his head multiple times. It'd never been done before or since, apparently.
And the rule is you have to do it with one arm stretched outright from your shoulder and then go up. So it's like there's a particular form to doing it that makes it really hard, but really shows you have total body strength.
Yeah, fucking hell. you can see the few times where where he's practicing to do it, and it's all just about like to have strength that you can make down to such a small, fine point.
You'd have to have such strong hands.
It's amazing to watch something like this, and I feel really silly because like they did a gimmick where after the strongman competition he came back and it's like he's the world's strongest man, no, for real. And they do all these gimmicks where like Christian's like, well, bend this frying pan then, or Tess like, well, bend this rebar then, and he'd do it. Like as a kid I was like fake. And I'm like,
it does look a bit fake though. That's the trouble.
Yeah.
Like, anything like that with strength looks fake because to us it's like, well, you can't do that, you're not a robot, you're human.
Yeah, and I think like watching him do a few of the contests in the actual confines of a strongman competition where you're lifting big fucking bales of wood
or carrying trucks on your back.
Yeah, man.
There's one we saw where he lifts a car, but he doesn't have like often you see people lift cars and they have a harness and all this equipment to make sure it's safe on their body and it's comfortable, it doesn't damage them. No, he like kind of opens the car door, puts the top of the car door just over the back of his neck, and then just lifts it up with his shoulders.
He has one tool that he uses, Joe. It's actually might want to look back at some of Mark's records, because he does use a towel now and then.
Oh yeah, he does use a towel.
Pop a towel on the neck, he can move a car. Anyone could do that if you got a big enough towel. What are you talking about? Like, I have almost the exact same pan that Christian asked Mark Henry to bend.
Yeah.
And it is a lighter looking pan, but yeah, that's still going to move. Like, he just puts anything he wants to bend near his groin, goes, and then it's bent in several pieces.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's most impressive about him is that he is strong all over. It's not just a case of, yes, he can lift things. It's a case of, yes, he's got this ridiculously strong hands. He can lift things with his shoulders. He can lift things with his legs. When he does the rebar pole and he snaps that in half, he does it on his leg. And like, yes, you have to have strong hands to do that, but to do it on your leg, you have to have legs made of steel. Like, there's no part of his body that's not rock solid.
I just loved watching the clips of him trying to like fire up the audience, because it's like he's about to like lift something where people lift it once. And he lifts it twice, which is a world record. Then he lifts it a third time, and he starts dancing afterwards.
I love the little dance.
He's about to lift the Thomas Inch dumbbell, which no one has ever lifted over their head before. And he just goes, a little quiet in here. And he starts milking the crowd. And everyone's like, hey! And it's like, a room full of bodybuilding aficionados. Most of them are ex-bodybuilders. Arnold Schwarzenegger's there, like, in awe of him.
Yeah.
And, like, in terms of the title of World's Strongest Man, he dominated at that Arnold Classic. And apparently in the strongman community, there are two contests that are considered to be like the contests. You could pick a random sample of 10 strongman aficionados. 5 of them would say Arnold Classic, and 5 of them would say the World's Strongest Man competition. But the thing is that the guy who Mark beat in the Arnold Classic that year was the guy who won the other contest. So he broke like 3 world records while he did it. He beat the guy who won the other contest. He did it at 3 months' notice. Like, the only person who comes close to doing something like, I wasn't even really trying, was when Arnold entered his own bodybuilding expo after doing Conan the Destroyer. It's like, I'm in great shape. Arnold Schwarzenegger's talking with him, and he's in awe of him.
Yeah, Arnie's properly, like, marking out Mark Henry.
And to think, when he came back in 2002 and I was arms folded, oh, right, yeah, World's Strongest Man.
If you'd seen that.
Fuck me.
The glee in Arnie's eyes, and he's like, I saw you last year and you lifted that weight and it was very cool.
Now, here's what happens in the WWE documentary. Mark Henry comes back in 2002 from having done a extremely impressive turnaround, proved all the naysayers wrong. He looked so happy and fulfilled because like, he did it, with his mother in his heart, like he dedicated it to her. He's top of the world. And then in 2011, Mark Henry entered people into the Hall of Pain. Now, there were 9 years that happened to take place between there.
Skip to the end.
This is a period of time where Mark was refining the character. He was able to be that monster heel. He wasn't quite yet that finished product, though.
Why did they make him heel?
Because he's big, he's strong, he's scary. And Undertaker
useless.
needed opponents. Goldberg needed an opponent. That was kind of Mark's role then. He settled into that big monster,
Oh, see, I just don't think that's right for him. Not saying that he was a bad heel, just to me, naturally, he becomes world's strongest man to, like, dedicate to his dead mum. He's the most charismatic powerlifter ever. Like, just be him. Just be himself. Like, do a little dance. Do some strength things, feats of strength, and then do a little dance. Talk to the crowd a bit. Like, that's all I'd need to see. And I'd be like, yeah, fucking favorite wrestler ever.
Because I think you like his actual personality so much, seeing this version of him. And I think there was always a bit of a sense of, like, you're putting on a bit of an act.
Yes.
Because he couldn't cut a promo really still that wasn't like, a little bit of that kind of shouty, short and to the point. Like, he was your perfect quintessential 80s big strong guy, and he's going to challenge Hogan at the Civic Center, brother, and Hogan will beat him. He had that monster heel, but he's not like going to be remembered past his time, surely. And there was a point though where I was 100% on board the Mark Henry train, and it was when another fellow injury prone wrestler, Batista, he got an injury, and they decided, right, Mark Henry did it. And I always said I love in wrestling when someone gets injured and they say, he did it. That fucker over there, it was them who did it. And then you get all the heat for it. And Mark Henry would brag saying, I broke Batista. The animal broke because of me. Like, I'm the strongest man in the world. Doesn't matter, I'm not champion. I broke the champion. He had to vacate the belt. You're there 6 to 9 months going, oh fuck man, I hope Batista comes back soon, gets his hands on Mark Henry. Batista finally comes back and he's like, right, I don't want to talk about the title. I don't want to talk about anything else. Mark Henry, get your ass out here right fucking now. And for the first time in like 10 years, Mark Henry comes out with a big smile on his face because he's so happy that he broke this man, and he's been living rent-free in his head the whole time. And Mark's literally rubbing his hands and licking his lips like, I'm going to break you again, motherfucker. And then he gets injured. And
Mark does?
Mark gets injured, yeah.
Oh, no.
And I mean immediately injured.
What was it, from like licking his lips or something?
No, they did like a tag match, and like literally Mark gets tagged in, and he's like screaming like, I have to tag out. It's my knee. It's my knee.
Oh, no.
And like Batista's there like, come on, come get me. And Mark's there on the floor like full like Vince McMahon quad blown angle. Like, I am injured again.
Except Vince wouldn't ever say he was injured. Vince would
No.
carry on with the show from the floor.
Like, what's the broken skull?
This is normal. Everyone sits like this.
The ring is my chair if I say it. Like, Austin talks to him about it in the podcast, and like they show like the unedited clip of Mark being like, he's frantic, Joe. Like, he's like, I mean, help. They show a few clips of him going out on stretchers and all that, but it happened a couple of times, and
God. I think it's the scariest thing, isn't it, about being so strong? I think it's part of the reason actually that Vince had the injuries he had with his quads, is because when you have that much muscle, you do get injured
more damage.
Easily.
Yeah,
you just have more things to hurt.
Well, Vince only tore his other quad because he was trying to stand up. Like, that's the great story that goes. But like, they had a clip with Mark's surgeon, and he's like tapping, going like, "Shit, I don't know how many times I went down on you. Like, fuck me. Like, what was this, like surgery 20, 25?" And Mark's like, "Yeah, I get hurt a lot." Mark's in his 40s at this point as well. It's worth bearing in mind.
Wow.
When a lot of wrestlers will be winding their careers down. I like, though, how he explains why he decides to or what led to him having this career renaissance in 2011 and this kind of famous Hall of Pain run that everyone likes to talk about. He said, it's hard to have 15 years of being good and never being great. That's a bitter pill to swallow, I think. Now, I did regale to you the real life reason why Mark Henry had this switch flipped at him and is like, I'm angry and I'm going to be this angry, horrible character now. Do you remember what it was and how it related to Vince McMahon?
He pranked him, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
It was something to do with, like, Vince told everyone to, like, go home at the end of a show.
Yeah.
But, like, didn't tell Mark and, like, told him to stay or something.
So they do a dark match when TV taping ends usually. So it's like, kind of the TV show might end with like, oh, your favorite good guy is like in a fit of rage or something horrible has happened to the face. And you don't want to send the crowd home going, oh, I guess Daniel Bryan's been killed or whatever. So you put out like a couple of other people, we'll have a little fun match just to send you home happy, end on a nice note, usually some silly stuff. And Mark's meant to be having the match against Sin Cara allegedly. And there is footage knocking around of this, of Mark stood in the ring, full gear, looking angry, ready to do a match, send people home happy. And crowd's half gone at this point. And Chimmel, the answer is like, ladies and gentlemen, we're just waiting for Mark Henry's opponent to arrive. And Mark's looking around like, all right, what's going on? More people are leaving. There's probably like a quarter of the crowd are left there. And it's like Tony Chin was like, yes, we're still waiting, ladies and gentlemen, but if you want to leave now, that's totally fine. We'll be back in Sacramento next year. And eventually Mark just leaves. He doesn't come, and he goes backstage. Everyone is gone. Everyone is gone, except for one little intern who gets to see Mark Henry destroy everything.
But why are the cameras still there? Why is there still an announcer?
I mean, the crew who take down the cameras and stuff like that, and Chimmel's part of that crew, they leave later on. But in terms of agents, producers, medical, all the wrestlers, all the friends of wrestlers, all that, they're all gone. And they're all gone as well at Vince's insistence, because Vince thinks a really funny prank to run on Mark would be pretend he has a match and then no one comes out and then he has to stand there like an idiot. There's pranks and then there's fucking
mind games.
What? Right, whatever it is about the prank you're pulling on Mark Henry, I can't get my head around. What did he think the audience would make of that? Are we all going to slowly leave? Because if I'm told I'm getting a fucking post-credit scene, I'm sticking around to watch it. How is that meant to play out?
Oh, you have no idea. It's so needless.
Do you think he wanted him to get angry? Because that's what, Mark got angry.
I mean, yeah, I can't see any other route. It's not even like it's a funny prank. It's not like the whole point of pranking someone is so you can laugh about their reaction to it, and they're not.
You're not even there. That's cruel.
See it. It is cruel. It's also very random. The timing of it,
so fucking weird.
And the amount of effort that would have gone into it as well. Vince McMahon isn't the type of person that speaks to the lowly interns and people. He just doesn't do that. And so for him to tell everyone to go home early to wind up Mark Henry, the world's strongest man, that to me, knowing Vince, sounds, when you say all that, it sounds like he was expecting Mark Henry to trash the place and then it to be a big story and an angle.
Yeah, and not to be fucking questioning the noble narrative of a WWE produced documentary, but right, he proves himself to you in 2002 and he's the fucking man and he's the greatest and all that, and no questions asked about Mark Henry's legitimacy ever again. 9 years later, he's 46 here. And you have him stood out there. Put on your gear, out you go. Get stretched, get warmed up. Ha ha ha. Now,
not really.
The rampage that he goes on was then kind of he meets Vince. He said he's furious with Vince. And Vince is let's harness that anger.
Vince apparently was very apologetic.
Yeah. Probably the only time he ever saw Vince be that way. He's so sorry, all that,
Which again makes me think it wasn't a prank, because Vince would have just laughed at him if it was a prank, right? He'd just be like, ha ha ha, you've been trolled.
The fuck knows how that man's mind works. It's honestly, I really am at some complete loss, because it's one thing if it was just this thing happened, it was a mistake, Mark got annoyed, and then we hey, remember that time you got angry? Why don't we make that into an angle? But instead it's this kind of hard reset of his fucking personality, even though it seems like he's doing all right. I tell you, 2009 and 10, Mark was fine. He was still a dominating presence. He was still a heel with heat. He was doing everything you'd want him to do. But no one, least of all me, could expect how entertaining and how fucking captivating this guy who'd been on screen for 15 years would be, just by... I showed you the segment, which was kind of what this was based off of. It's him pushing the little intern around and what's this do? It's it's a
the little intern, the professional wrestler with biceps the size of my entire body.
I love him being thrown into the void.
Yeah,
it's fucking absolutely brilliant. So he decides to rechristen his career as being about the Hall of Pain. Did you understand what the Hall of Pain was, Joe? It's a simple enough hall.
It seems to be like Jericho's list. It's a vague place that doesn't exist. It's a state of mind where his enemies live.
Pretty much, yeah. But you had to get beaten up first to be inducted into the Hall of Pain.
Okay.
And I was sitting there going, all right, we're giving him a little rub. We need to have a new baddie for this month. Oh, he's going to take on Randy Orton. I'm sure Randy will beat him like he always does. And Mark Henry becomes the world's champion for the first time in 15 years. And his promo when he wins, he's so bitter. And I love it. He's like, don't cheer for me. I'm not sharing this with anyone because you're all haters. You're all doubters. I hate all of you. And this is for me and me alone. They had the next night, JR was like, I'm here with the world champion. And he's like, you never believed in me neither. He's shoving him around, pulling out his tie. You're the reason why my career was spinning its wheels for 15 years because you cut the legs out from under me. Oh, fuck me. That's such good shit, man.
Yeah.
And from the category of such good shit, you want to watch some big man meat slap another men's meat? Meat? Meet me at the place, yeah. We're going to go watch Mark Henry versus The Big Show for the World Heavyweight Championship from Vengeance 2011, baby. The first thing I noted in this match and its recap package was Big Show's commitment to his new hat.
Yes, this little egg warmer.
Aww.
It's exactly like the type of egg warmer you might get to look after your boiled egg.
Oh, you're making me hungry now.
No, yeah.
An egg the size of the Big Show's head. I'm only having one egg this morning.
I can put you off, though, because that would be an ostrich egg.
Oh, no.
Nice.
No, that's cursed. I don't want that. So, there is an absolutely incredible atmosphere here because everyone's just excited to see these two very large men beat the bejesus out of each other, which Jerry the King Lawler almost immediately negates by saying, I think Mark Henry's got fee-fi-phobia. Just a fear of giants.
Boo.
Boo.
Fire him. Mark Henry does a really scary thing with a chair to the Big Show in a video package before this match.
Oh, yes. This is the chair gets put around the leg.
Yeah, and then he climbs up the turnbuckle and jumps off it onto his leg. That's something I would be scared to see Jeff Hardy do, let alone Mark Henry to the Big Show.
I love watching Mark throw his body on. You see when he does these moves with people where they kind of fall on top of him. He's so careful at squashing people, but you never really know it. He puts the tiniest bit of his forearm out there, and he's totally fine. It's okay. So I think the story was he had broken the Big Show's leg over the summer, and Big Show was back with a view to kill Mark Henry for what he'd done to his precious leg.
Right. Okay.
I thought that this match was a very fun, big monster mash. They were just slamming into each other. They were in kind of slow motion, but everything felt super, the ring was wobbling the whole time. I really got into it.
Yeah, it was they kind of worked up to a big spot towards the end of the match where along the way, Mark would climb up a couple of the ropes, do a jump off, and then you'd see the whole ring kind of shake and wobble beneath them. So you do immediately feel a sense that, oh shit, these two guys are big and they're heavy.
I love Mark Henry's facial expressions. I think he can, with a glower, fucking give you 20 things to unpack. Because the story at the start is that the Big Show keeps beating him to the punch. He keeps leaving the ring. And he's kind of he's frustrated and he's a little bit scared, the tiniest bit. But, it's not very easy for someone to be a monster heel to be I'm out of the ring, fuck this. And not be aha, coward. He didn't give off that vibe at all.
Yeah.
He gave off the vibe that, he just has to, figure out what he has to do. He was deep in fucking thought, even though he's got 3 moves in his repertoire. And of course, as soon as I was talking about his great facial expressions, I was pointing at the screen going, Joe, I'm telling you, Mark Henry's facial is probably some of the best in the business, and you look up, there's a big dirty booger down his face.
Yeah, that was upsetting to see. One of my favourite things about Mark Henry in general, but especially towards the end of his career, from here onwards, is he's so sparkly.
Oh, yeah!
He looks like a precious mineral. The way he's so sweaty, but the sweat, just shines off him.
Oh, I love, there's a thing he does when he's getting all, worked up and he comes out to the ring and he'll slam his chest. And because he's wearing that kind of singlet that absorbs a bit of water, and he's obviously sweating, and he's loads of water in his dreads and all that, and he does that, and just a big, it's like a Triple H splash comes off of him just because he's so big and he's fucking soaking wet. I fucking love it. All good, but I love the ring gear as well. I always loved that he had the singlet with a little bit of shine and all that. Very rarely we get to talk about a big powerhouse having immaculate gear, but I'm a big fan of Mark Henry's for sure. There is constant chat on commentary about how these two are big boys, and you think, all right, we're going to go for kind of a Godzilla reference or big animal. Did you pick up on their animal that they were building towards?
They're going hard on the rams.
Rams!
2 rams locking up. 2 rams ramming together. It's rams colliding.
Rams ramming their way. Look, rams are intimidating. They are.
But they're quite small.
They are. I've come face to face with a ram a few times in my time.
Yeah, me too. The only person I know who's come face to face with a ram and was genuinely scared was when I went to the farm with my friend's younger sister, who at the time was 7. and she got attacked by a ram, and it was really scary.
The ram might think that it's something to eat, like,
Yeah,
so.
but then I came in as a 12-year-old and was like, just stood in the way, and then it was fine. So they're not that scary. I would have gone with a bull or something.
Bulls would work. How about when Michael Cole goes, this is like Transformers, guys, this action. Oh boy. Start shaking that camera a little bit, then get back to me. What I like about these two guys is that they're both veterans and they have the crowd in the palm of their hand. And I hate the amount of times when veterans wrestle like this when they don't have the crowd in the palm of their hand, where it's like slow build up.
Yeah.
But the fact that they do it, it's like, oh, it's a scoop slam. And it was like, yeah, the Big Show did a slam. Can you believe it? There's some fucking scary shit here, though. Big Show does that, going up to the top. Big Show does that choke slam to Mark off the top.
Yeah.
And it's like, like the ring is really starting to like allude to what's going to happen there.
I love that they do that. I don't know how they've managed to do it, but it's great. It just gives you enough of a, oh god, imagine if the ring collapsed.
Sorry, I just realised I have a follow-up point here from earlier. If Big Show and Mark Henry are, as Michael Cole described, like Transformers, what type of Transformers? What would they turn into, do you reckon?
Well, Big Show's self-evident because he'd turn into a monster truck.
He already did.
He already did, yeah.
Easy peasy, yeah.
Mark, I'm not sure.
He'd be like one of them heel building ones, like you'd be like, you know, kind of like a big steamroller or something like that, or like kind of a wrecking ball or something like that. Now, what you don't know behind the scenes is that when I posed that question to Joe, fucking unknown Transformers superfan over here starts saying, oh, he's quite like all these Transformers that I don't even know.
I said he wasn't like those Transformers. I was trying to go through my Transformers knowledge, and I was like, well, there's Bumblebee, obviously, or, you know, there's the lazy choice, Jazz.
I roll, allegedly. I just wrote down, I think Big Show's a Decepticon, because he just he turns heel all the fucking time. It's his own goddamn fault. Jesus
but he
Christ.
cries. A Decepticon would never cry.
Get that on a t-shirt. So they head up to the top, and yes, the wobbliness was not in vain. The ring is broke! Oh my god. You've seen this happen 4 or 5 times in wrestling, including right at the start of the pandemic when they're like, we're out of ideas. We don't know what to do.
I mean, if you're going to do it with big hoss men.
Yeah, right? That feels to me like there's a weight limit that was broken that led to the ring happening like this.
And the fact that it got more bouncy and wobbly the more big moves they did over the course of the match. It told a story.
Yeah, they were building up slowly and slowly getting to that point. I was mind was blown over watching this live. Could not believe that they had done the ring break spot again. And they'd done it like 9 years prior, I think.
Oh, really?
So the fact that we've held off on doing it again for no, it's definitely happened since then. I feel the discipline with the ring breaking is gone.
Yeah.
And I think them breaking the ring during the pandemic where you could hear every squeak. Every fucking loaded spring. It was just, no. This here, though, crowd or like a tidal wave of reactions. Except they show so many replays. Did you see Booker T when that ring broke?
No selling it.
Didn't even flinch.
Nah.
This was your first match, I think, having Booker on commentary. What was that like for you as a matter of interest? Side note, like...
He was quite distracting. He's not very good.
He demands attention. Like.
A lot of the comments about Rams were from him.
Yes, he was really hitting that Ram point home hard. I also appreciate as well, of course, match called off, but the super slow-mo, because they hit with such force and they're so big... They got like a couple of extra bumps out of him, I thought.
Yeah, Big Show landed 3 times.
3? Jesus Christ!
Poor guy. Imagine how bruised he was at the end.
Like, these lads were in the twilight years here now. They're not spring chickens at all. That's a fucking tough bump.
Like, Mark Henry is like in such ridiculously good shape. Like, he's got a 6-pack. You can see it through his clothes. And like, you know, for people who haven't seen what Mark Henry looks like, he's a very large man.
Yeah.
You could be mistaken for thinking he's fat. He still like has muscles shining through.
100%, yeah.
So I think for him to land like that, it's probably not, I mean, I'm making big assumptions again. It's probably not as big a deal as the Big Show, who is less athletic and less has worked to get to the body he has and is more like genetically just that's what he's like.
Yeah, Mark is like got such a broad shoulder base on him, and like you were pointing out, you could see in his singlet that he has just like this solid fucking
six-pack.
Yeah, it's a lump of pure fucking muscle, you know, and he is a meat barrel, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
This was a quite a thing to see, and I always feel the Hall of Pain probably got overlooked a little bit as being like truly a special, something different, because this happened almost concurrently when CM Punk had his big special Summer of Punk that people like to talk about. So
when he did the poo in the ring.
That was it, when he did the pipe bomb, which canonically Joe now accepts is when he did the poo in the ring that one time. So it did
what I like about that, what you've just done there, is that anyone who hasn't heard those other episodes or doesn't know about CM Punk now thinks that you are teaching me that the pipe bomb.
Yeah, that's why I'm not allowed to teach anymore.
I didn't say the pipe bomb was a poo in the ring. I just said, did he do a poo in the ring? And then you said, yes, the pipe bomb. So now you are continuing this lore.
But I think the more people look back on that Summer of Punk, which was like so much fun to watch at the time, it was one of those things that you look back on that and it feels like every time you look back at it, there's a new thing to be like, oh, that wasn't so good. Or, oh, yeah, that bit was kind of made it not as good as it could have been. And every time I look back on the Hall of Pain with Mark Henry, it's like, God, that bit was even better than I remembered. Shit, he got they did 3 matches, Big Show and Mark Henry in 2011. And like the third match, the build up to it was that the Big Show did a top rope elbow drop, which is what he actually tried to do in this match. That's why Mark went up and suplexed him.
Wow.
And like the fact that they built matches around a single move, like these big men are going to do a thing, that's like fucking, you know, and all the little ins and outs of like why Mark was feeling this way at this point in time. It's really intriguing stuff. I don't know if you were expecting that kind of level of depth from Mark Henry.
I wasn't. You know what? I absolutely was not. And I thought this match was really good. Like, my biggest criticism of it was that Big Show is not good at selling when he needs to be. He's forgetful. He's like, the commentary team put over that he's broken his leg and that, you know, this is his main thing is like his leg hurts. You don't want to see him sell. Like, even though Mark goes for the leg at one point in this match, Big Show doesn't really sell it.
This is recurring because if you remember, we did New Year's Revolution 2006 for our pay-per-view classic, the most fun series ever on Patreon. And remember he had the broken hand gimmick and that with the hand in the cast.
Oh yeah, and he didn't sell that.
He didn't sell, and his hand was in a cast to remind him. So he obviously struggles with some of it. Yeah.
He's too busy crying.
Oh, God, the Big Show shows made you all sorts of ornery for Paul White.
No, I love him. I wish that he did sell by crying. I'm being serious. Like, if he was like started crying in pain in the middle of the match, like, oh, my leg, it's so painful. Like a big guy like the Giant, I'd have loved that. It would have brought legitimacy to his injuries, I think, and it would be an interesting way of him selling in his own style. Yeah,
definitely. It'd be very unique to him, and it would mean a lot more coming from someone of that size.
Never would happen, though.
What is your rating for the Battle of the Big Boys?
I gave this 3 stars, so 3 whole stars more than Jerry Lawler, so fuck him.
I was really not, I was not expecting high star ratings for Mark, to be honest. Just because there's kind of a basicness almost to his wrestling.
Definitely, but I think I don't blame him for that, because that's the beauty of wrestling is all the different styles that you get.
It's not the moves.
It's not about the moves. It's about how you put them over, how you sell them, how you tell a story. And this is a perfect example of how you take very few moves. Like, both of these wrestlers only have a repertoire of like 3 to 5 moves, and yet it tells
very generous.
I know, and yet it tells a really good story. You're invested. It's like, oh, will they learn another move finally?
In the best way possible, this is what I thought wrestling was when I was like 5. You know, 2 very big men slowly building up to, you know, you
doing
could probably,
an elbow drop.
You could probably show this thing. You know, anytime we meet a member of your family and they're like, I remember Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy. I'm like, well, fucking dig this. You know, your granddad would love this show. I'm convinced. So we get to one of the most infamous moments of Mark Henry's career when he pulled the wool over all of our eyes and fake retired. Now, what was interesting about this segment is that he had been for months and months legitimately telling people, yeah, I'm done. Like, they show lots of clips of him going out and doing his kind of advocacy work and being like, yeah, I'm pretty much finished now. Not much more doing for me.
Yeah, because at this point he's a top ambassador for the WWE, so he's doing lots of charity work.
He's doing stuff like anti-bullying. He's done stuff for like Special Olympics. He's also worked as a scout for the company as well. Like a busy boy in terms of what he's doing with his time. You know, Braun Strowman, Bianca Belair, like there's a long list of names who are signed to the company because of him, you know. He's been one of those people who's been instrumental in helping a lot of like the big men in the performance center like Otis and Keith Lee, and, you know, helping them know what the style is and what's expected of them. Another thing which I didn't know at all, I only found this out from watching with interviews, is that Mark was very hands-on with like how his matches were like filmed and things like that. So the way that in a lot of his matches, if he's like beating up a smaller guy, he'd insist that the small guy is set up with the camera so he can crawl towards the camera and Mark can loom over them. He's like, makes me look big, makes you look in peril, makes it all look better. Or like when he's coming out, you always see a lot of shots with Mark where the camera swings around over his shoulders.
Yeah.
And that's to give you the sense of breadth and width that he has.
It's film class 101. It's literally what you learn in your first lesson of film.
Wrestlers never talk about that. Shoot me like this.
It's not their fucking job, okay? Now, I think it's great that he knows this stuff, but it isn't his job. And I'm never going to come out of this being like, yeah, all wrestlers should be like Mark Henry and take film class. Like, your job is to be a great wrestler and performer. You don't have to know all that stuff. But the camera crew, the people in the gorilla position, all that team, the directors, the producers, they should know that stuff.
Absolutely.
That's like standard storytelling.
I think like any wrestling group, particularly on a smaller scale wrestling group, I think you'd have to have that that dynamic where the wrestlers are kind of saying, well, you know, I'm viewing this in my mind like I'm watching a wrestling match. Here's how I think it should look, and kind of working with the camera people to do that. Because so many times I feel like wrestlers, you don't get the sense of them the way you're meant to, and it's the camera's fault.
Because the camera tells its own story, and anyone who has even a passing interest in film studies will know that, you know, if you're working with a villain, you shoot the villain differently. If you're working with like a horror and you're following the victim around, there's different camera techniques, angles that you can use to imply space or imply a presence. Like all these little things that you get taught in school, if you're or if, even if you're teaching yourself, that you pick up. Mark Henry's obviously like a fan of film. He's like paid attention.
Yeah. It makes a difference. I think it's
a big difference
when you have a limited repertoire as well.
Yeah,
like it being shot a particular way will make it seem a lot more impactful than if you're doing an extra flip or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Mark once again falls victim to the Vince McMahon meeting. He's telling everyone, I'm retiring. That's it. I'm done. Hanging up the boots. Goes in to meet with Vince and tell him, comes out with a 5-year deal, and his quote, I'm going to die in the ring, aren't I? Jesus Christ!
Oh dear, that's so funny. That's so Vince.
But I like as well, though, that that's kind of like what that fake retirement story is.
Yeah.
It's like, you think you're getting something, and like, you're getting something else entirely. You're getting 5 more years of Mark Henry. That's kind of like what Mark does in this segment is kind of like what Vince does to him in that meeting.
Yeah.
Explain what happens. There's a salmon blazer, John Cena's in the ring, and there's a pair of boots up on the ramp. Like, take us through this fake retirement, as you recall it.
It's been a while since I've seen it, bear in mind.
Mm-mm.
But Mark Henry comes out, he talks about how, you know, he's had a long tenured career. He starts, his voice starts to crack. You can see it's really emotional for him.
Oh.
He's talking about, you know, how much he's enjoyed his time being a wrestler and how happy he is to have been given the opportunities that he has been given. He talks about how he's going to spend more time with his family. He brings up his kids' names.
The fact that he uses the term active roster, which is such like a non-kayfabe term.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm leaving the active roster. He was like saying like, I'm not ruling out being in a Royal Rumble or whatever.
Yeah.
That's why I bought it so much.
Yeah,
the fact that he
careful
said
wording.
that, it's like, oh well, he's retiring in the way that you would retire. Like the Big Show's retired now. He'll show up now and then. Nothing prepares you for it.
No, I can't remember how he does it. Does he just literally go like, ha ha, just kidding? Or does he attack John? Or...
He has tears streaming down his face. I'm going to start crying and say it now, where he's like, a poor Silsby boy done proud. With his fucking voice cracking. And he says, tell my kids, daddy's coming home. And John's like in fucking tears, clapping. He raises his hands, and John like has the belt, and he's like, you should wear that, and he's like, no, that's for you, man, and all that, and then he turns around and he slams him.
So funny.
You think it's that easy? I still got a lot of gas left in the tank. That's what I do. By the way, that's what I do is the greatest fucking catchphrase ever. I love it.
Is it a catchphrase for him?
Yeah. He'd just kill everyone and then he'd be like, that's what I do. You know, after he caused his chaos and his havoc and
That's
all that.
That's a good one. I like that.
Fucking brilliant. So yes, this is setting up the retirement ? Match. John Cena, Mark Henry, Money in the Bank 2013. The WWE Championship is on the line. The one belt that has eluded Mark Henry. He is meant to be the bad guy here. It's worth bearing in mind. But you can't tell that crowd that.
No, I think the fake retirement thing worked too well, I guess. They love it.
Half this audience are wearing salmon blazers, Joe. They're on his sides. This match, oddly, same arena, exact same building where Mark took on Jerry Lawler all those years prior.
Really?
Fun facts.
Wow.
He's 50!
That's mad.
50!
He literally looks exactly the same as he does when he's 21. And I'm not saying
No, he looks better. He's cooler. He's stronger. He's got a cooler beard, cool hair.
Better dressed.
50!
Yeah. Amazing.
Was it true that life begins at 50 is what they've been saying?
If you're Mark Henry.
Big if true. There are loads and loads and loads of shots of women in the audience when Big Match John comes out.
He's so popular with the ladies.
Woo!
Woo, sexy John. It's with his dick shirt as well.
Oh yeah, what is this shirt?
It says like champion is here or something, or this is the champion, or
This is the
suck my championship, I don't know, and then it points to his dick.
Excellent.
What does it say?
It says the champ is here
Oh right.
with an arrow pointing at the WWE Championship.
If he's wearing it, and if he's not, it's pointing at his dick.
It is, yeah. So, that's it. That's what it is with John. It's kind of like it's a shame thing. It's like if I lose a title, and then I'll become very huge. I lose my child fan base. So I think I'm talking about my Willie again. That's in the past, John. Mark Henry has a fucking PhD in talking in the ring. I don't know if we've talked about it much. It's something that definitely developed later in his career. Him grabbing John Cena by the face and saying, "I will own you," is quite intimidating. John sells it well. He looks scared.
Yeah, I feel like this is definitely at the turning point of John's career.
Yeah.
Like, you can see he's really been training hard. You know, the fact that he wrestles a very impressive style with someone like Mark.
I mean, I'd bottom of the barrel anticipation for this. Even with the angle, I was like, great angle, shame about the match we'll have to watch. And yeah everyone brought their fucking working shoes on.
John's, he's got his Hollywood face on, he's acting the fuck out of things, he's wrestling the shit out of stuff. It's great.
I loved rewatching this match with you just because I had a little bit more time to kind of, you know, it was like rewatching a good TV series that had layers to it, and I was eyes fixed on Mark Henry's facials for this, because he manages to pull some of these little emotions out where it's like, I fake retired for this.
Yeah.
Like, they talk to people in the documentary where, like, D'Lo Brown's like, yeah, I was texting him saying, fuck you, because you had me crying.
Yeah.
All of his friends were, like, felt massively betrayed by it. And there is an element of, like, this is and they're talking confident. This is Mark's last shot.
Yeah,
you don't
boy
win the
who cried
title here.
wolf.
This will be your legacy that you fake retired, and it kind of is.
Oh, you know it is,
and it works so well because it's such an interesting wrinkle.
Yeah,
he's the world's strongest man. He doesn't need to pull this shit out, but he feels like he has to because he'll never say, "I think my time is up."
Aww.
It's the closest thing he'll come in that monster kayfabe heel. You know, I'll just fake retire then. I guess that's how I express myself.
We have the big John drop kick.
Yeah.
Love that drop kick.
Bring out those new moves, John Cena.
And then Mark gives Cena the swing.
Oh man, this was fucking powerful stuff.
So good.
You were like joking when he went for the legs, like, oh yeah, do the swing, and then he did.
Yeah.
It was a different swing to Cesaro's one because he was less kind of trying to spin him and more trying to like toss him like a fucking shot put or something like that, you know? Like, John kind of got up quite high off the ground.
Yes.
There were feats of strength from both men in this.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. You can tell, like I was saying, like, John's obviously been training really, really hard, and the swing can, I think, be helped and assisted by the person being swung.
Yes, definitely.
By using a lot of core strength. And you can see John's abs activate when he gets put in the swing.
This is one of the only matches I've watched from John Cena. And it happens sometimes if you go maybe 20, 30 minutes or, you know, that nice period of time where we both got into watching John Cena matches. And it's like, hey, AJ Styles is going to have the best match in the world with John Cena, you know. Before then, we're in 2013, this is only a 10-minute match. John was sweating and sweating hard. And it's not as if he was out of gas. It's just that the core was activated, like, you know. Yeah. The machine is on and the wheels are turning.
He tries to do some really hard stuff. Like, he tries to do the double A on...
AA.
Oh, it's the AA.
So just so you know, right? AA is the attitude adjustment. Double A is Arn Anderson. A double is Austin Aries. So just be careful, because it is a literal minefield.
Oh, jeez. Okay. But AA is the car insurance people. Also
the attitude adjustment.
Okay.
Who do you trust more, the AA or John Cena? I know.
My dad has been with the AA for 35 years, I think he said. Not maybe longer, maybe 40 years. And he says he's never once been let down by them. He says, it's the one thing wants to teach me is to be with the AA.
Well, I've been with John Cena for a good 4 years now, Joe. And he's been wrestling less and less as each year went on. He's yet to disappoint me. So there you go.
But yeah, John, he tries to do the AA, but Mark's so big and heavy, he lands on him instead, which is... Oh.
It's like the setup to do the I can't quite get him up probably actually takes more strength than actually getting him up, because you can see John, he's kind of squat down with Mark completely on his back, and his shins are like the veins like...
Oh.
It's like he's turning into a titan or something.
No.
It was good stuff. Joe, you pointed out to me that you could see John Cena's underpants while he was doing this AA.
Yeah, and his underpants match his "You Can't See Me" branding, I'm pretty sure. I'm like, you know how you've got your Calvin Klein
Don't tell
thing?
People that about... No one should know about my pants. Least of all you.
Well, I'm pretty sure John has "You Can't See Me" on his underwear.
Custom made, never sold, knowingly.
I don't know. Maybe.
How about that? So we get to the point now where Mark is getting a little bit desperate. He's tried some of his big moves. He's hit the world's strongest slam. He's kicked out of the attitude adjustment. He goes out and he grabs the chair. It's kind of like almost borderline Toru Yano tactics, because he starts he rips off a turnbuckle as the ref is going to fix it. He rips off another one. Like when the ref is distracted again, he just kicks John in the balls.
Yeah.
And there's something about that where he's like, this is it. This is all I've got left. I'm going to kick him in the balls. I'm going to hit him with a chair, whatever.
I love this so much. The idea of the world's strongest man being like this almost cowardly, but not really cowardly, but like a cheating heel is so funny. It's so entertaining.
And the fact comes after that retirement as well, where it's like, I want to win so I don't have to be the guy who's going to be doing this, because this is all I can do now to win. Oh, it's fucking deep. Like, honestly, there's a lot of people who talk about kind of a lack of lore in wrestling and people want to ascribe lore to it. And I think that is definitely true. Like, there's infinite pits you could fall in trying to make sense out of wrestling. See The Fiend or The Undertaker or any supernatural character ever. But in terms of, these men telling the story off the base of that very simple setup, fake retirement, this is, is close to perfect as it gets. And again, not a million moves on display in this match, Joe. I think Mark busted out a swing, which I hadn't seen him do much before. But other than that, it was amazing. And when John gets him in that submission hold and Mark is pulled back to the middle of the ring, I got such strong the bad kaiju is being destroyed by the army vibes, because he's like, nah! Screaming as he's been pulled away.
He's got big kaiju energy.
100%.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. He's going to fuck Godzilla up, He's going to split Godzilla's wig, So he does tap out to the STF in the end. A hard-fought battle for John Cena. And a match where, it says a lot about Cena as well as Mark Henry. Where everyone was cheering Mark. I was like, well, he's going to beat John Cena. I like the angle. Everyone was booing the shit out of John. Everyone was cheering for this end. People were captivated by this.
Yeah.
They got him in their hands, Joe. But did it captivate you? Did they capture you in their hands?
I really enjoyed this. It was some very impressive and surprising moves. I didn't expect John to be this good at this point.
Yeah, it does make me kind of I always thought it's 2014, 2015 when John got good.
Me too.
Here he is, you pointed out. He was already doing it.
Yeah. I think he's just been very clever with the fact that he did it slowly, because in wrestling, if you do things too quickly, the fans get emotional whiplash.
Yes.
And they just rebel. And I think John realizes in this match, there are a few moments where the crowd are like, let's go Cena, Cena sucks. And it's really interesting watching his wrestling style adapt depending on what they're cheering.
Yeah.
Because as they say, let's go Cena, you see him getting more powerful. And then when they say Cena sucks, you see him withdraw slightly, almost as though it's the fans that give him the power to succeed.
Yeah, he does manage to actually, despite when he comes out, he has dueling chants, he does manage to kind of, like Stuart Lee with his odd,
Yeah.
he splits him up, he appeals to the side who he knows he's going to appeal to, and the other side kind of comes along for the ride without almost realising it. There's enough people in the front row who are still, in 2013 in this, wearing We Hate Cena t-shirts.
But there's also like a couple of young lads, you know, white men in their 30s who you would think are like hate Cena at this point, who are like, let's go Cena! Proper into it.
Proper heroic performance. Really good.
Yeah, and they work so well as a team. And yeah, I'm really glad to see John fight someone like Mark Henry at this point in both of their careers, and for Mark to fight someone like John at both of this point in their careers. Like, it was just really good matchup. I only gave it 3.5 stars because at the time I wasn't like sitting on the edge of my seat being like, whoa, this is the best match ever, because it's not. But it is good compared to other stuff that they've both been a part of.
100%. I definitely agree with that. And I think, like, what is so good about it, in my mind, it's very rarely is someone going to be like, right, I'm here for another 5 years now, I guess, which Mark was at this point. But it's not as if Mark was doing championship matches after this, or he was going for a run at the belt. Like, after this moment, he was very much, I'm here to enhance the younger talent. Like, one of the first things I remember him doing in like 2014 or 15 was insisting on putting Pac, the former Adrian Neville, over on TV, and apparently that caused a big uproar. The Vince is like, no, you shouldn't lose to the little guy. He's like, no, he's got something.
Yeah.
Why have you signed me if not to put people over?
Yeah.
You know, and that's like what you want. That's the best case scenario. I'm really happy as well that, like, you know, the segment that everyone loves has a match that's like almost as good to kind of match with it, because I always just thought, oh, it was a great segment. I'm sure it was a grand match, but it's a good one. You should probably go check it out again, folks, for sure.
Definitely.
So Mark now finds himself in the Hall of Fame with a lot of footage in this of him and Big Show being so cute and sweet together that it makes us want to rewrite that Netflix series of his, I think.
Yeah, the Big Show should have just been like him and Mark Henry just having fun.
I said they were giant rascals.
They are.
Or big scallywags.
Yeah, big boys.
I like Mark's Hall of Fame speech, you know, in that he, like Curry, did a bit of time to kind of, you know, make light of some of his sillier gimmicks and stuff like that. I like that his boy wore the salmon blazer.
I like that his daughter's called Joanna, because that's my name.
That's your name. Very good. Mm-hmm. And I also kind of remember during his Hall of Fame speech, he just randomly shouted out Owen Hart's widow and was like, please, Martha, let Owen in the Hall of Fame. It's time to move on.
Oh.
And like, no more so than kind of like some of the issues there, which we talked about earlier with Leo and stuff like that. That heart is firmly in the right place. I do believe it is. But there is kind of, I think it'll always be there with wrestlers, an inherent clumsiness of not understanding the subtleties of why you don't just say, please, Martha, let Owen Hart be in the Hall of Fame. You know? He was very close with Owen, and I just feel like Mark does have a little bit of a tendency, and it's worth bearing in mind, as well spoken as he is, and as an authority as he is, that like Hart might be in the right place, but I think there is an inherent clumsiness with all these wrestlers as spokespeople.
I refer to it personally as emotional object impermanence.
Whoa! Emotional EOI.
Yes.
EOI.
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 In that, I think a lot of wrestlers, it's not just wrestlers, I think all of us generally are bad for this. But I think especially wrestlers are really bad for this, are bad for thinking that because they feel a certain way about something, that must mean everyone else feels the same way. And I think that's never more apparent than when the issue of Owen gets brought up.
Yeah.
In that they all love him so much and love the family, of course they do, and think it's so sad what happened to him. But they all love wrestling more than anything else. And they think, well, of course he was a wrestler and he was so good, so he must love wrestling more than anything else, and so this would have been really important to him. But the fact is like, actually, if you can put aside your emotional object impermanence for a second, you'd know to him and his family that's not actually probably what their top priority would be.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the stuff that comes out with Mark, and I think this happens with Booker T as well. It's like, I think podcasting's I'm always going to talk about how great podcasting is as a format, because it's, how we make our living, and has been for many, many years. But in terms of like, hey, let's get Mark Henry and Bully Ray and a bunch of other wrestlers and a couple of like radio DJs who like know how to push the buttons and get them riled up. Like, it's a hothouse for fucking controversial headlines. That's what I feel like 90% of wrestling podcasts are at the best of times. It's honestly one of the reasons why I don't go out. I used to listen to a lot of stuff like that, like Busted Open Radio and stuff, and I kind of try to avoid it a little bit, just because, like, they're there with their mate having a fucking chat in their stream of consciousness, and it's like, I don't really know sometimes if he realizes the weight that his words actually carry. Yeah. He obviously realizes to an extent, because he speaks out about issues and he's passionate about them. But like, I was somewhat shocked by the reaction from the tweets to the Facebook comments. There were people who kind of had felt that way about Mark. Right, yeah. And kind of being a shill and all that. And like, I think, don't look to WWE to find your fucking moral compass. There are people in there who mean well, but as long as they're within the confines of that corporate structure, they're handcuffed to an extent. It's nice to hear, people talk their mind and speak their mind to the extent that they can. It's still part of a company that's ultimately quite evil, with a very fucked up man in charge still, who Mark Henry still thinks is the guy, And
massive power imbalance. Like, just the vast amount of power Vince has in that industry. It's just incomparable to anything else.
I will say, though, in regards to, before we get into our tweets and our Facebooks here, I'm very happy to see Mark have the role that he does have, because I feel like we so often end an episode like this and we're like,
what could have been?
And there's a busy boy, like.
Oh yeah, he's fucking thriving. I'm actually more excited about his future than I am, like, even covering his past. Like, I think that all the stuff you've told me about his influences on wrestling, but not as a wrestler, like his ability to spot talent, like being able to spot Bianca Belair and go, that's a star. Like, wow, what a gift. Amazing. Like, his ability to be able to take like basic film studies lessons and apply that to his own wrestling character. Like, if he's able to do that to like other people, like if he could maybe be more involved with like the general direction and production of wrestling, I think it would only be a better place.
Well, the Performance Center needs people like that for sure. It needs someone like Mark Henry, who knows a lot more than you would probably think. I think those are the best types of mentors in the world, because they're going to stick him up with someone like Otis or whoever it is to learn how to be a big man. He's probably going to learn 100 other things they hadn't, thought about. Yeah. It's the closest thing we have as a replacement for the wrestlers traveling together and learning from the mentors. And like, in the pandemic times as well, now more than ever, like, fucking hell, knowledge is hard to come by, I imagine, if you're an up-and-coming wrestler in the WWE. So, yeah, the future is certainly going to be a very interesting one for Mark Henry. The elder statesman of professional wrestling, I think that's something that he will settle into very, very nicely indeed.
It's so cool, though, that he's like, often when you think of elder statesmen, you think of these kind of decrepit old men who can't do it anymore. He can still.
Oh, yeah, man. He what a figure he cuts, like. Hair. Can we have fucking Mark Henry in his Hall of Fame tuxedo looking like Black Kingpin with fucking beautiful peacock bow tie? Can he be general manager?
I am about to, like, pitch the greatest idea ever.
Please.
A cinematic match with Mark Henry.
Ooh, with feats of strength.
It could be feats of strength, but, like, given his love of film and camera work and his love of storytelling, silliness, okay, yeah, he doesn't want to be like a wrestler necessarily anymore, but he could still be very creative in the industry, and like I'd love to see him be involved properly with a silly cinematic match.
It's nice, isn't it? You end an episode talking about their career, and they're finished their career, and you're super hopeful for the future of what it's going to entail.
And you know what? He's not like problematic or anything. I know people say he's a bit of a shill, and it is sad that he's not spoken out on as many issues as we would have liked, but he is still young. Yeah. And he's got a lot of time to learn, and if Randy Orton can change, there's hope for us all.
The benchmark of 2020, baby, coming back into 2021. Let's have a look at your tweets and your Facebook posts about the world's strongest man, Mark Henry. And we're back. Time to get into some of your tweets and your Facebook messages about the world's strongest man, Mark Henry. And hey, big shout out to those of you who, again, use that hashtag How to Mark Henry, you can always continue the conversation if you're listening to this episode in the future. Joe, have you got some tweets for us?
I do, but before I start with the tweets, there's actually an important thing that I meant to say in the main part of the episode and forgot.
Oh!
Very important for continuity, strong brand guidelines for How to Wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Nudity.
Oh, of course, there was nudity. Mm-hmm. There was nudity, and we didn't actually mention that.
Nude hunks. So obviously in our Rey Mysterio episode, we found out that he did a special photo shoot where he was naked and sexy. And in the documentary we watched for this episode, it was revealed that Mark Henry has a photo of himself naked in the Library of Most Talented People.
It's an incredible place. It's this like special, large scale museum in Texas, and he's basically saying like they celebrate the best of everyone, like
the best of everyone, the best of everything.
Yeah, he says like from weightlifting to tiddlywinks.
Yeah,
and he thinks it's him and his son walking around. He's like, look at me over there, son. I'm naked.
I love the fact that like he is the world's strongest man. Like that's what he's in there for. And there he is, this like lovely photo of him looking honestly gorgeous, like naked, but it's so artistic. It's like really nicely done.
The world's nakedest man was a moniker. Like, I mean, I don't know if it's like world's strongest man, if it's like kind of controversial if you just proclaim to be the world's nakedest man. Like,
how can you be more naked than another naked person?
Well, how can you be more strong than another strong person, Joe? It's got to be some sort of a contest, is what I'm saying.
Okay, look, how do you judge that then?
I'm not judging it, but I'm just saying, Mark, there may be members of the naked community who might start calling you out now, and you might have to step to it and go do a special Naked Arnold Classic.
Well, he's already got. I mean, he's in a library of most talented people, and he's naked, so I think they've got no leg to stand on. Really.
That's pretty that's quite the flex, though. In fairness, anything else like you could be known for in there. Adding naked to it as well, like that's incredible. So have we got like a rolling document now of wrestlers who have appeared nude?
Yeah, and I'm not including like, because obviously there have been some wrestlers whose like nudes have been leaked, for instance. I'm not including that. This is consensual. They've been involved in a shoot with them naked. And yeah, we've got 2 people so far. I think that's it.
That's impressive. I think it's something we need to point out if it happens in future.
Yeah.
In any would-be episode. Don't come at us with naked pictures of Terry Funk if you find them. No, we don't need that. Thank you.
I want one of Stone Cold. I want a tasteful nude photo shoot with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stop! Why are you laughing? I'm being serious.
I want a tasteful naked photo shoot.
He's got a beer, and he's guzzling some beer, and it's kind of rolling down his body tastefully.
The nudist episode of Subcultured came out recently. I think that could be coming at us here. Hey, give me some of those tweets now. We got a lot of chatter about this. Some really interesting insight on the Twitter and the Facebook about Mark.
First up, from Born Micah over on Twitter. Saw Mark Henry at my first live wrestling show in Belfast. After winning a match, he stole a kid's Rolo chocolates and had a munch at ringside. 10 out of 10 personality.
All right, that depends entirely now if he was working face or heel, because although actually both ways is pretty charming, isn't it? Like,
yeah, for Mark Henry, I mean, he can get away with it. He's incredibly charming.
Okay, the only way you have to put a bow on that though is he has to say that's what I do once he eats the last Rolo. Like.
Who would you be most annoyed at if they took your Rolos, and why is it Seth Rollins?
Oh yeah, Seth does have that look on him, doesn't he?
Just that fucking bastard. Like, fuck off, get your own Rolos.
Now, what Seth would do is he'd take the Rolos and he'd start chewing them, and he thinks it's like gum, and he spits it out. And you find out that's how he's been eating gum the entire time, his whole life. And then he'll go on Twitter and complain about it if you call him out on it. Over here on the Facebook, we had several people who pointed this out, and I figured this is something worth mentioning because it's something I didn't know, and I think a lot of us who are watching wrestling did not know. Sexual chocolate is actually a reference to Coming to America, the Eddie Murphy movie.
Okay.
And that is, Mark has said in interviews, not declaring it from the rooftops or anything, but he's like, yeah, we were just joking, that was a bit. So like, sexual chocolate, one of those monikers that sounds almost too good for wrestling. Turns out it was taken from a movie, so there you go. That's
typical wrestling.
That's very wrestling.
Next, from Michael Scally at Fizz vs. the World, possibly the best example of a fine wine in wrestling. Endured decades of booking seemingly designed to make him want out of his contract, only to end up with a final run that The Undertaker is surely envious of.
No one's ever had a turnaround like that. And I've had some people tweeting me since between the points of where we recorded, the first part and this part, telling me that they think that it was $1 million a year that he was getting that original run. $1 million. So he had 10 years, and 2006 when that contract would have ended. The point that is when, you know what I was saying, the really disappointing thing where he came back for Batista and he got immediately injured? That's the end of that 10-year run where he was getting a lot. I mean, you don't get re-signed after that usually. I imagine he got signed for a lot less money when he came back for his second go-around as well. Like, that's got to be humbling to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, that's wrestling, isn't it? They love to humble you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd like to be humbled by being given $1 million for 10 years. Like, that's a nice humbling. I'd take that.
Next, from It's Jack Robert. It's fucking tragic that this guy who was deliberately given shit angles in order to quit the company has now become a mindless shill for said company.
I mean, mindless shill, I mean, that is harsh, but, like, I totally get it if that's, like, how you're going to walk away from Mark, because he is a vocal defender of WWE.
Yeah.
And, like, you know, hey, we watch a lot of WWE for this podcast, and we find it kind of weird sometimes, like, talking about this company when, you know, a lot of the things they do are fucking evil, or you're calling out about it a lot of the time, and you kind of sit back and kind of go, like, God, this is a fucked up company. But he works for them, and, like, he has the blinders on as it relates to the shit that they're doing. He doesn't kind of seem to want to take them off.
Next up from The Gutteridge, proof you should never write someone off completely. Had years of failed pushes behind him and looked set to fizzle out before every single thing clicked into place, finally in 2011. From that point forward, he could even get salmon jackets over.
I think he's like something that's really inspirational about that with Mark, because, you know, as folks who started podcasting in their mid to late 20s, which is a period of time where when you're growing up, no one tells you, no one gives a shit about you when you're in your mid to late 20s. And I think a lot of people who are listening are probably going through that sense of listlessness that can happen. And, you know, there's a lot of pressure on you, if you're a millennial or otherwise, to kind of have it all figured out by age, you know, 30 or age whatever it is. And here's Mark Henry, who probably didn't have all the pieces put together and didn't really start cooking with gas until he was in his late 40s. You know, and that's pretty incredible, so yeah.
Yeah, the closest comparison I've seen is to DDP. In terms of, like, getting into wrestling quite later on in life.
Yeah.
You know, not that 30 is that late on, but for wrestling, you know, it is. But the thing is with DDP, like, he started wrestling late, whereas Mark Henry, he was wrestling for ages. He just wasn't any good.
Yeah, like, that's the kind of thing. Is like, hey, you know, we've all done mediocre stuff in our time.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's... if you've ever been in the position where you feel like you're not doing great at something that you have previously been told over and over, like, you'd be great at this, like, this is what you're meant to do with your life. And a lot of people find themselves in that rut. And, you know, as tempting it is just to kind of cut bait and, like, float off into the wild blue yonder, I think Mark's sticking to his guns. And most wrestling fans at the time would have been like, yeah, Mark, give it another 10 years. I'm sure it'll turn around. Fuck no, but he did.
He did, yeah, and he smashed it. Next up from Mo Square. The fake retirement speech in 2013 was one of the greatest promos in the Fed's history post-2002. Henry's acting in particular was outstanding. It's just a shame that it didn't amount to anything since he lost to Cena at Money in the Bank 2013. A couple of people have commented on this. The fact that he lost his match after he did the fake retirement speech with Cena. And I agree. I think he should have won. I think you should have given him, like, a proper push as this, like, nasty mega heel.
I get that, because I mean, like, yeah, obviously as a fan I wanted to see that happen. I think I kind of had changed my mind just by rewatching the match, just because I thought the tragedy of the villain doing all these things to be like, haha, I'm gonna fucking fuck my career up for this one shot, and he did, and he loses. It's like, oh, that's a nice end to, like, that evil Mark Henry character. But yeah, I mean...
Oh, I can see what you mean.
But also, John Cena getting beat up in 2013, I feel your pain, guys. I really do.
Now from Sam Tomlin 539... Aged well as an excellent descriptor, hurt by silly Vince expectations and booking when he came in, but his late 2000s/early 2010s monster work was absolutely outstanding. Also, a ringing endorsement for the 1998 era Nation of Domination, which, despite it being hugely problematic in a racial sense, did help get everyone involved more over than they had been beforehand.
Yeah, well, look, we all know, guys, the Nation of Domination...
It's the cursed chalice, isn't it?
No, it's just a bunch of guys who had the attitude of, we're going to do what we want to do to get to the next level. They're very hard pressed to try and explain the Nation of Domination. But, yeah, I think Mark really was the the sleeper hit in that group, because I think there was a hierarchy of who was going to be getting over, and I think Mark Henry and everyone would have reckoned was last on that list. Like, you know.
Next from Branavan Candy. My favourite Mark Henry story is when he had a broken foot in 1996/1997. Top star Shawn Michaels took his crutch, to which Henry said, "I will tear your arse off the bone." HBK tackled...
Arse off the bone?
Uh-huh. And then HBK tattled to Vince, told on Mark to Daddy, and Mark Henry spent about a year in the Heart House.
Oh shit, I've heard this. Mark did go, I did a little reading about this, because Brett just randomly mentioned once, like, you know, people would come in and train and all that. Yeah, Mark used to go to the Hart household for like long stretches of the time to kind of train up a little bit, and he looked after the kids and made them spaghetti dinner, from what I heard.
Aww.
I just hope there was no cat turds in there, like, you know. You work in the same kitchen as Stu Hart, you got to give it the once over, folks, that's all.
Also, fucking hell, Shawn Michaels telling to Vince because I stole his crutch and he yelled at me. Go rub your fucking glove against your face, you pansy.
There's a deep cut right there.
Yeah.
I tell you what, though, a fucking sitcom that's Mark Henry, the world's strongest man, who doesn't know his own strength and yet doesn't know how to wrestle, having to move into the most famous wrestler in the world's household and cook spaghetti. That sounds like a good time. Move over the Big Show.
Actually, seriously, on that note, for people who've not listened to our The Big Show, my main takeaway from that was The Big Show should have just been about Mark Henry. And
yes.
Like, genuinely, he's such a good actor. And I'm saying this here because, like, he's such a great actor in wrestling as well. Like, just the couple of promo-y bits, there's the silly segments he's involved in. He's always the shining star.
I heard a couple of people here on the old Facebook saying, you know, when he was going to go away in 2006 and when the contract ran out, he apparently was saying to them as his main bargaining position. Now, whether or not he was actually going to do this or if it was just a bargaining position, but he's like, no, I'm done and I'm going to go do movies.
He should. Honestly, he should. He's such a good actor.
There's a lot of, like, clips. He did do some bit parts here and there. Like, I know he did this MacGruber with Jericho, and he did some other kind of, like, there's a picture of him with the guys from Hot Tub Time Machine and all that. You were watching a clip earlier as well, weren't you?
Yeah, he was in some shit movie. Wasn't good and just, mad problematic. But he was really good in it. Like, he is just very talented and he's very watchable. And the fact that he's got great range, like, he can do angry, he can do charming and flirty.
Could have got an easy little career for himself doing that.
Yeah, and like, he makes The Rock look like shit. Like, he's so...
Whoa!
Like, The Rock can't act for nothing. Mark Henry is such a natural actor.
Yeah, I think Mark obviously was taken... Because it's around that time, 2006 is when he started really dialing up, you know, the promos and the conveying of the anger and all that. And I just wondered, probably a few acting lessons were going on, or like he was just kind of maybe prepared for that life.
Well, as we know, he's got an interest in television and film. Like, it's obviously something he's passionate about and takes his own time to get better at these things. So
yeah, definitely.
That's very cool.
Oh, very, very cool. And it's not as if he's bragging about it, folks.
No, he's very modest.
Anthony O'Keefe here. A late bloomer, perhaps WWE could have helped him along the way a little bit better. Of course, he wasn't great to begin with, and it took a long time for him to get to the Hall of Pain. But was he ever going to succeed when they tried to bury him with a pervert gimmick? Oh, and do you remember the time he squashed Ryback? Do I ever? This is great. You know, usually if we have a little break between the first part of recording and the second part, you know, sometimes bad stuff can happen. In this case, some great stuff happened because Mark Henry's just been on a tear about Ryback on Twitter in January 2021, and I'm having a great time enjoying it, Joe.
Yeah, it's great. Ryback basically worked himself. He was all like, wrestling's fake and no one's ever lost a championship, proving himself to be a fake wrestling fan, because like immediately all wrestling fans could like list 10 instances, you know, Chris Jericho literally losing the championship at an airport, you know, Bret Hart losing the championship, you know, because it was taken from him. Like, there's so many instances of it actually being not predetermined.
And most wrestling fans have been preparing for this since they've, you know, thought about talking back to that bully in school, like, you know.
Now that bully is Ryback.
Oh, it's so funny because he was like, hey, if any of your wrestlers you see Ryback, tell him to go fuck himself. If I see Ryback, I'm gonna fight him. Like, and Ryback was like, then responded, he's like, all of us in the wrestling community, none of us actually respect Mark Henry. John Cena once told me that, like, Mark, he's not a really good worker. And also, I saw Mark Henry napping one time. And Mark Henry's like, all right, yeah, we call up John now. Like, him and I are really good friends. And, like, I think he's a great worker and vice versa. And as regards to napping, I napped all the time. I napped before my WrestleMania match with you. I napped usually every TV taping. It was a big running joke. I love to nap.
You know what? He will live forever because of those naps.
Yeah.
And Ryback, you've just got to go and eat for your blood type, haven't you?
I don't need to sleep. I eat for my blood type. Also, why do I feel so sick and tired all the time? Oh, the best thing he said was, first of all, your name's not Ryback. Stop calling yourself Ryback. Which is a pretty hearty takedown of someone who's doing the whole wrestling's not real defense, you know?
Seriously.
I could listen to Mark talk for a long time about idiots. Like.
Okay, I've got 2 more.
All right, let's send us off on a high note, Joe.
First up from Ern Anderson. Kevin's laid it on pretty thick over the years, calling Henry lazy, a bad wrestler, and a failed Olympian. But when most of Henry's national and international weight and powerlifting records still haven't been beaten, over 30 years later, could any wrestling career ever even top that?
I mean, I think I was, like, wrong. Obviously wrong. And it was like, I was wrong, and I think then I got into a nice, easy habit of making jokes about it, and buttressed by the decades of the wrestling community seem to be like, hey, let's all make fun of Mark Henry.
When's your Notes app apology coming?
I think, obviously I have to clear some space for my shopping list and I'll pop it on top of that right there. But I don't want anyone to ever think that I'm like fucking precious about my opinions about something that I made jokes about nearly 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
Because
oh God, it's one of the things I love about you most.
If I was the same person that I was in 2014 and here I am now fucking all grown up a bit later and Jesus Christ, you'd be a bit worried about the lack of fucking momentum in anyone's life at that point. No, like, honestly, if you want to call me out and hold me to task for it, I mean, I was doing it myself earlier in the episode, mainly because the fact that it is embarrassingly true and completely unavoidable. I did routinely make fun of Mark Henry. My only, like, ultimate regret about that, because it's like, you know, an idiot making jokes or whatever it is, but I was kind of the host on that show, and I think Adam and Billy, Billy didn't know who Mark Henry was at all, and Adam had such little experience of Mark Henry. He was mostly gone by the time Adam was watching, and I kind of felt like I just gave them, like, here's your ready-made Mark Henry opinion, and this has happened in 2013 when Mark is doing great fucking work, and I just kind of felt like, I didn't want to talk about how great he was when Billy was coming out with bangers like Sexual Marmite. So, like, I think there is a moment in, like, season 2 when we're reviewing its Survivor Series and it's Big Show and Mark Henry, and we're like, way, it's the lads we make fun of, and we're like both all quietly like, oh, this match was really good. And as big as those men were, they were never could have matched the tininess of the three of us at that moment in time.
Aww. And you know what? I think it teaches wrestling fans, us all, a valuable lesson, which is you don't know which of your opinions that you hold right now, which are going to end up aging really badly.
It's, you know what? And the thing about wrestling fans as well, and I think it shows you about how the kind of the stuff that you make fun of sticks, is that that's the first tweet I've probably ever received where someone is like, you used to make fun of Mark Henry and said that he was lazy and he was shit and he was a failed Olympian and all that.
I had to pay him £100 to get that one as well.
But, like, I will still routinely get tweets where people are like, you said Jeff Jarrett would never come back to WWE in 2014. Care to explain? I'm like, right, one thing is me being, like, just taking the temperature of the time. The other is me, like, massively making fun of someone unfairly when they were been proven right at that moment in time that they were not to be made fun of and to be taken seriously and enjoyed. And I think that says a lot about wrestling fans. We hold on to dearly the things that we, like, make fun of wrestlers for. But it's all right to fucking go roll it back, says me, rolling it back right now, many years later.
And Sexual Marmite, that's just a banger. Although I'm going to argue he's Sexual Bovril because I like Bovril more.
Yeah, and he's got a bit more beefiness to him as well, I think, a little bit.
Kind of salty, yeah.
Yeah, definitely salty.
Okay, last one now.
Kevin Mahan on the 23rd of August 2015, you said.
No, I called in the big experts for this one. Okay, I thought we'd get a tweet now from one of the most respected professionals in the wrestling industry.
Oh, okay, here we go.
Someone who can speak with authority on the legacy of Mark Henry.
Finally.
So here we have from the Iron Sheik.
Excuse me.
Respect the sexual chocolate.
Well, you can't argue with them facts, folks. You gotta. Hey, it's been an awful lot of fun talking about Mark Henry, someone whose career has lasted from the 90s through seasons of podcasts and beyond. Mark Henry's definitely someone who, like, he proves in wrestling you think you know someone, and I feel like I've learned almost as much as you have, even though I've been talking about him for years and years, and I've been watching him for fucking 20-something. What are your final thoughts on Mark Henry, Joe?
I love him. I mean, oh God, he is a complicated person, and I think it's difficult for me to talk about his sort of current day leanings towards protecting the Fed.
Yeah.
Because I don't really keep up to date with modern day wrestling a huge amount. Like, I don't follow wrestlers on social media for the most part, other than John Cena's Instagram. You know, I tend to accept the fact that a lot of wrestlers have bad opinions, and I don't really want to know about them.
And 2020 and 2021 really fucking put that in bold for us all, yeah.
But obviously now he's called out Ryback, I might have to change my mind. Honestly, I love what I've seen of Mark Henry. I think his acting, like I said earlier, is just fantastic. I think he's a really interesting wrestler. It makes me think of wrestlers who I want to say grew up watching, but, you know, when I was getting into wrestling over the last 6 years, which of those wrestlers have been influenced by Mark Henry? Because there is now, you know, much more diversity in terms of body shapes and sizes, and big boys is quite a mainstay in the WWE now.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to think of, like, you know, how Mark Henry will have influenced not only, you know, big boys in wrestling, but also, like, yeah, as some people have pointed out, like, black people in wrestling.
Yeah, that's true.
Holding championships, like, just generally. I mean, the main thing for me is I'm just so excited about his future. And again, it's not often I get to say this at the end of an episode with someone who's, you know, kind of retired from pro wrestling. But the fact that he is still, you know, he's got firmly at least 1 foot in the wrestling industry. The fact that he's got kind of sights over, you know, he's in the Big Show, maybe he'll be in television or Hollywood stuff. Like, the fact that he's got this interest and the talent and ability. He's so cool. He penetrates the mainstream. Like, I feel in terms of modern day wrestlers who non-fans would know about, he's one of them.
Yeah, and I think he's one of those people as well that just the mystique of him still to this day.
World's strongest man.
Yeah, and I think as he gets older, it's like one of those people where you can have him as like the elder statesman in wrestling, and it's kind of because he's a big, broad motherfucker. You can kind of you can just see that carrying weight and gravitas for the next 10 to 20 years if he shows up.
I'm so excited to see what the future holds for Mark Henry. Just so excited. Like, just in front of the camera or behind the scenes or writing or wrestling development or, you know, scouting. I think he could do it all. He's so good.
There's an interesting book in there for sure. You know, you say like writing or whatever, like there's a life story there that really needs to be told. Because I still feel at the end of this episode, we're barely scratching the surface of the enormity of the career of the world's strongest man, Mark Henry. And hey, Joe, next episode, we're going to be flip-flopping, flying by the seat of our pants and heading up to the pay window. Because we're going to learn about an American dream. The dream, of course, of Dusty Rhodes, the common man, the son of a plumber, and the father of Joe's least favorite wrestler. We're going to be talking about Dusty Rhodes' legendary career, from his days in the territory to the NWA, his days as champion, to his days claiming that he's hanging out with John Belushi while writing wrestling shows, booking Dusty finishes, and driving people up the wall, with his indelible mark on the world of wrestling that will never be forgotten. We're going to be talking about the life and times of the man, the wrestler, the writer, and the legend, Dusty Rhodes. Use the hashtag #HowToDustyRhodes. Let us know your thoughts, feelings, promos. This man is a master of the mic. And Joe, we're dealing with a legendary character from the 80s. I'm thinking he's going up on a level that is really only equivalent of someone like, say, Ric Flair that we've done an episode on. This is a man with a big career and with an ability to talk like nothing else.
I know next to nothing about him.
Really?
I know he occasionally wore polka dots. I know that he helped out with NXT and he was quite essential to the formulation of Bayley's character.
Yeah.
I know he had a lisp. I think that's about it. That's terrible, isn't it? I don't know anything. I'm so excited for this episode.
I think you're going to love him because you generally seem to have an appreciation for people in wrestling who are bursting with creativity and manage to find a way to let other people harness that in some manner.
And I know that he has changed the course of wrestling as a form of storytelling. I know that he's like permanently altered it. I don't really understand how. I just know that he has.
Like, we're talking about someone as well with, in terms of move list, he's probably going to be equivalent to Ric Flair in terms of, you know, not going to be 1,000 million moves, backflips and moonsaults we're talking about. So I want to spend a lot of time talking about the character, the creativity, the promos, the verbiage, the penetrating of the mainstream and changing wrestling. And like, that's something I'm really intrigued about, because I don't think anyone other than Vince McMahon that we've done is going to have like their fingerprints over modern wrestling as a television product other than Dusty Rhodes. So, oh boy, this is going to be an exciting episode. Once again, thank you all for your tweets about Mark Henry. Until next time, where we're talking about the dream and heading down that dusty road, it's a goodbye from me, Kevin.
And a goodbye from me, Joe.
And we'll see you next time on How to Wrestling.
See ya.